Chapter 11:11. After not seeing each other for dozens of years, the two of them were old men in name and in fact had a lot of things to talk about. They were vigilant as they walked through the void rift, but they did talk a lot at that time. Now, they were more relaxed as they stood in the Inferno Mountains and looked at the clear blue sky in the distance. They wished they could turn into two salted fish and bask in the sun without any worries. Of course, it would be even better if they could bask in the sun without being sprinkled with salt. The matter of the void mist had been a thorn in Navira's side since the beginning, and it became a thorn in his heart after he talked with Yin Nuashing. Later, he found out that this guy might have something to do with the Dark Age, and his whole person became a little gloomy. However, he was actually a little better, and there was nothing he couldn't get over. The main thing was that when he saw his old friend's face, he was too embarrassed to say that he was worried. Instead, he went up to him and comforted him, afraid that this old man who had opened the coffin across 70 years would push him back into the coffin. In fact, he already had such thoughts, but fortunately, he was convinced not to. Yin Nuashing verbally said that he had given up, and he also had the idea of giving up in his heart, but Navira was still worried. However, there was no better way at the moment, and he could only repeatedly remind him not to act rashly. If you really can't live in the realm of the gods anymore, come to my place. There are plenty of places for you to stay. Yin Nuashing glanced at him and laughed. Actually, I'm just using your place as a place to move my family. I'm just waiting for when I'm depressed to move my whole family over. Okay, anyway, I've already made a deal. I've left a place for you. If you have any difficulties, just come. Anyway, you won't let me come to the realm of the gods for now. Navila shrugged. But I'll say it again. If you can't get over it, just come and find me. You don't have to worry so much about the void mist. I know that brick is in front of the door, but it's useless even if you're anxious. Yin Nuashing and Navira had a lot to talk about until sunset. Only then did Yin Nuashing prepare to leave. He had obtained some very precious information in the world of the gods today, and he wanted to go back and sort it out to see if he could find anything about the void fog. If possible, he wanted to get rid of it before it endangered the entire 8 elemental realm. However, the chances were slim. Even the gods of thousands of worlds in the Dark Age couldn't get rid of it. There wasn't much power in this era. It's a good thing that the pillar wasn't written down in words. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to understand it. Navira smiled again. He patted Yin Nuashing on the back and grinned. If one day I see you lighting up the void with thousands of stars, I'll rush over without hesitation. Come on, don't be so dramatic. I just want to be a salted fish in peace. Yin Nuashing spread his hands and sighed helplessly. Navira laughed and waved his hand. His body began to emit a faint golden light. He grinned and made a confident gesture to Yin Nuashing. I'm leaving. Your best friend in the void will break through the void and come to your side when you need it. After leaving behind some mushy words, he laughed and gradually disappeared. His body was overflowing with golden light, leaving only a golden ball in place. After the ball of light appeared, it rushed to Yin Nuashing's hand and made a slight buzzing sound. Your best friend in the void. Yin Nuashing sighed in melancholy. His palm gently stroked the ball of light as he muttered to himself. You are, but I'm not. After settling the matter of Fengyan Mountain, Yin Nuashing suddenly remembered something. The matter of the star trial. This matter had already been thrown to the back of his head by the more troublesome matter. Because Ziyin had retrieved the origin of fire, the trial of fire could be considered to have officially passed. In his senses, there were traces of the aura of starlight landing on his body. He knew that it was the faintly discernible star Fate. He had already obtained the best one, so it actually wouldn't affect him if he fused more into that reddish-black star. The quality is not bad. Yin Nuashing clenched his palm and felt the celestial fate that had just fused into his body. He muttered, If I didn't go to the Saint Spirit miracle, the reward for the trial of the stars would be quite generous. Well, even the divine flame that was ranked in the 20s is useless now. It could be used to fill up that star, which is not very abundant. He rubbed his hands and could not help but chuckle. At this moment, he certainly knew the various deeper meanings of the trial of the stars. Although he did not completely understand it, he could still explore and understand some of it. The answer to the source that he found was actually a little normal, but since it was harmless, he was too lazy to follow the vine to the melon. Little purple soul, who had been cooped up in the soul world for a while, was finally released. She slipped out of Yin Nuoxing's soul and ran around the group on the ground. It was not until Yin Nuoxing pressed the little girl's head that she calmed down. But she was not quiet for long. She grabbed little Magic from Bing Air's arms and rubbed him like a ball of flour. Xiao Xian, who was hiding on Yin Nuoxing's neck, could not help but shudder. Brother, where are we going to play now? Little purple soul looked up, her big purple gold eyes sparkling with beautiful colors. Yin Nuoxing smiled and rubbed her head. After pondering for a while, she turned to look at Temple Master Guang and said, "It's about time to go back. No matter how busy we are, we still need to take a break. Going back to rest for a while should not be a problem." Hearing that, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. After running away from the gathering in the southern plains, they rushed into the burning mountain without stopping. It was as if they had taken a stroll in hell. Then, they rushed into the void rift and fought a fierce battle with a group of ugly monsters. Now, they could finally rest for a while. Yin Nuoxing looked at Xian and said, "Xian, you have other plans. Fenger, you come with us." "Yeah." The two girls were slightly stunned and nodded subconsciously. After a few seconds, Xian asked, "Little star, where are we going? Aren't you coming?" Yin Nuoxing shook her head and walked up to her and rubbed her long hair. "Don't worry, it's just a small matter for you. It will be solved very quickly. It won't take much time. I'll wait for you at the Nine-God Shrine. Elder, I'll send them over later. Please take care of them for me." "No problem. But where are you sending them?" Temple Master Guang nodded. "The Southern Plains, Monster God Mountain." Xian immediately understood what she was going to do when she heard those words. She sighed softly and nodded at Temple Master Guang with a confident smile. Yin Nuoxing smiled and turned to Yuan Shi and the others. "If you have time, go and complete the star trial. The star fate reward is actually not bad. It can also expand your capacity. Of course, it's fine even if you don't pay attention to it. The star fate you have now is more than enough." Ming blinked and suddenly said, "Are we going to the Little Divine Land?" "It's not far. The matters outside are more or less settled. We have to go there." Yin Nuoxing nodded and looked at Little Moon and the others. She smiled. "You can adjust your condition and prepare to break through to the elementary god rank that you have always dreamed of. As for me, I also have to make some preparations." Little Moon and the others didn't hear the last sentence, but they heard clearly that they could break through to the elementary god rank. They were so excited that they jumped on the spot. They could have broken through long ago, but they had been listening to Yin Nuoxing's words and didn't do so. They were still waiting until now. Although the 7 trillion seal ensured that their cultivation was not wasted, the feeling of being able to break through to the elementary god rank when they were so close to breaking through was still very hard to bear. Now, they were so excited that they were like slaves who had been oppressed for hundreds of years who were finally freed. 1 or 2 hours after Yin Nuoxing and Navira's conversation, Xian and the others had already recovered. Yin Nuoxing didn't waste any time. He waved his hand and teleported everyone to the Demon God Mountain in the Southern Plains. He didn't stay here for long. He just gave some instructions and said a few words. After leaving Xian, Fenger, and Hall Master Guang behind, he quickly left with his people. Anyway, with Fenger and Hall Master Guang's help, there was no beast on the Demon God Mountain that could stop them. He was quite relieved. Now, he had another thing to do, so he hurried back to the 9-deity temple. The movement of his token opening the door was as loud as ever, attracting the attention of many people in that space. Now, there were not only the 9 floating islands of the 9-deity temple in this space, but also the 2 enormous floating islands of the Yuan family and the Qin family. They had only been out for half a day, so it was impossible for there to be a complete change, but they could still see some obvious changes. The size of the 2 floating islands of the Yuan family and the Qin family had expanded a lot. The originally compact, small towns were no longer crowded together. The defensive walls were almost completely removed, and even the 2 main cities were no exception. Just like the 9 cities on the 9 floating islands of the 9 deity temple, there were no walls to restrict them. The 3 parties were now in a friendly relationship. The people of the 9 deity temple were responsible for making the atmosphere more relaxed, while Yuan Shi and some of the elders of the Qin family were responsible for keeping the atmosphere cold and serious. Then, they would be glared at by the former. As for the patriarchs of the 2 families, they were drinking tea and chatting with each other with their arms around each other's shoulders. It was a very natural thing for the higher-ups to negotiate with each other. The younger generation of the 9 deity temple, the Yuan family, and the Qin family were all very interested in the sudden addition of a transcendental force as their neighbor. Moreover, under the intentional or unintentional disregard of the elders, they quickly got into a fight. It was a real fight in the truest sense of the word. There were explosions of energy in many places. After not seeing each other for half a day, the flames of war were everywhere. Although it might be a little exaggerated, this was the situation in this space at the moment. The younger generation of the 3 forces were in an unprecedentedly intimate relationship, and they were spilling blood and sweat for a friendly relationship in the future. The higher-ups did not care, but the elders in charge of watching the scene were quite attentive. They took care of the big and small passionate exchanges to prevent a bloody disaster from breaking out. When Yin Nuoxing and the others returned, they saw such a situation. Moreover, their group of people had charged in such a high-profile manner, which attracted many people's attention. The main reason was that the spatial fluctuation caused by the token was too great. Moreover, this time, they did not rush to the bottom of the Golden Temple, but directly emerged from the space. The commotion was even more exaggerated. A conservative estimate was that they had attracted the attention of 80% of the people in this space. Everyone in the Yuan clan, including the people in the small town outside, was no stranger to Yin Nuoxing. When they moved, he was the one who assisted them. Although the people in the 9 deities temple did not tell others about the existence of this young temple master, they still recognized him. Only the people in the Qin clan and many of the subordinate forces did not know who this group of people who had rushed out was. However, they would find out very soon. After all, there was a total of 41 suns hanging above his head, and 39 of them were related to him. This information would be passed down from the higher-ups, and soon everyone would know about it. This was also to appease those who were not in the know. However, there was no need to explain in detail. Those people did not need to know about these things completely. Most people would not pay too much attention to things that did not affect them. As long as they knew what had happened and the extent of the impact, they would slowly get used to the rest. The grand entrance of this group of people caused this space to quiet down for a while, and then it became lively again. Yin Nuoxing and the others had already quickly returned to the 9 deities' palace. They did not have the time to see this group of people clearly. They only felt that the space was quiet for a moment, and then became lively again in an instant. After settling Ming Ming, Yuan Shi and the others in the Fire Divine Shrine, Yin Nuoxing rushed to the top of the shrine. There were still traces of the coiling silk cave there, and no one had taken care of it. He saw a thread-like object passing through the pillars at the top of the shrine and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. These were all traces left behind by his ascension back then, and even after coming back a few times, he didn't take care of them. It felt like they were deliberately left behind by the Hall Masters. He found a comfortable position and laid down on the platform that was filled with the power of thousands of stars. He took a deep breath and slowly closed his eyes. He emptied his mind and threw away all the troubles that were lingering in his mind. His mind gradually sank into the other side. After a short period of darkness, his eyes became bright again. A few seconds later, he opened his eyes again and came to the Star Palace. What entered his eyes was a starry sky that was constantly evolving. It was chaotic, disorderly, and without any pattern. The star creation chart was still changing and analyzing itself in the unremitting star source evolution. He left here last time, so it was not surprising that he came here again and opened his eyes. It was just that he was a little dizzy. He unconsciously thought of the 1,000 years he had been sitting here. He had to find his way out of this room before he fainted Yin Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief after he retreated from the room that was filled with stars. He casually shouted in the long corridor of the palace, and a 4-meter-tall, humanoid energy body came out of the wall. It was a blurry human form, but its legs were a mass of energy mist. It was so blurry that it had no facial features, only a pair of big white eyes. When it saw Yin Nuoxing, it lowered its head and bowed. Yin Nuoxing looked up at the humanoid energy body that was changing between purple and blue. He nodded and said, "Take me to your master's room." The energy body made a buzzing sound, turned around, and floated along the corridor. Yin Nuoxing followed behind it unhurriedly. "How is he recently?" Yin Nuoxing asked casually. What responded to him was a series of low, buzzing sounds. This energy giant itself was rumbling and reverberating with this kind of energy, surging, buzzing sound. Yin Nuoxing felt that it did not speak at all and was a little depressed. Did the flower I brought last time have any effects? Has he woken up recently? Buzz, buzz, buzz. Yin Nuoxing, fortunately, the journey was not long. The energy body brought him to a door, bowed, and disappeared into the wall. Yin Nuoxing glanced at it, then reached out and slowly pushed the door open. What appeared behind the huge starry door was a simple little room. Compared to the palace, this room was indeed very small. There were many abnormally wide windows in this room, and the walls were made up of stars that flowed with time. When he raised his head, he could even see the ceiling. It was still a starry sky that was a mixture of black and light purple. The only difference in the room was the dozen or so windows. The scenery outside the windows was clearly completely separated. The dozen or so windows each pointed to a place in the star field. Through the thin glass, he could see the endless star field. The blazing light of countless large stars fell into his eyes. It was incomparably resplendent and mesmerizing. In the middle of the room, there was a large bed against the wall. This was everything in this room, and there were no other furnishings. A thin figure was lying on the bed. There was only a small bump under the thin and wide blanket. It was a very small and young figure. It was a pure teenager in his teens. It was different from his tender face that was 8 meters tall. A purple flower the size of a wash basin was placed neatly next to the old teenager's pillow. The faint fragrance of the flower lingered in the room. When Yin Nuoxing pushed the door open, he could already smell the strong fragrance of the flower. With a light sniff, his entire body would relax, and his mind would become tranquil. It was obvious that it had been placed here for some time. "You're here. You look worried. What's bothering you?" A burst of faint laughter woke Yin Nuoxing up from his daze. His cheeks twitched, and he turned around to close the door. Then he walked towards the only thing in the room. A ball of white light appeared beside the bed at the same time. It was a blurry and complete white figure. When Yin Nuoxing saw it, he felt like slapping it. "Can't you change your appearance?" Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes at him. He casually leaned against the wall and tilted his head to look at the thin figure on the bed. He frowned slightly. "Is this what you look like in this lifetime?" The white figure chuckled. "It's my original appearance. It's just that I'm a little smaller. I still have to wait for tens of thousands of years to grow. I find it strange. Why can you guys maintain your original appearance after reincarnating? Why must I become like this?" Yin Nuoxing pointed at himself gloomily. A mirror appeared in midair. He looked at himself in the mirror and grinned. Although he wanted to show a paralyzed smile that was uglier than crying. When he smiled, his face had endless blessings such as holiness, beauty, and so on. He was speechless. The reincarnation of the soul will more or less be affected. You've reincarnated for billions of lifetimes. Maybe you've mistakenly reincarnated into a girl once or a few times, and then left a mark and became like this. The white figure crossed its arms and joked. "Sounds terrible." Yin Nuoxing sighed and waved the mirror away. He pondered for a while and said, "Do you know a lot about the Dark Age?" The white figure was stunned. Apparently, he did not expect him to ask this. "A lot, but not all. I'm a person from the late Dark Age. If you want to ask me about the things that happened between the 40th and 50th eras, I can only give you the original words from the books. You know, the records in the books are a few primordial realms away from the truth." Yin Nuoxing shrugged. But some things can't be too different. Have you heard of the void mist? No, the abyss mist? The white figure was stunned. Yin Nuashing saw that his light dimmed a little. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. Seems like you know something. The former laughed bitterly. Why would you ask this? All right, I know a little about it. People from the Dark Age would more or less know about these things. But for people who were born in the last years of the gods, they might have forgotten everything. They might have forgotten those nightmares. Nightmares that are not acknowledged by others. After that, he spread his hands again. But I don't just know a little. I know a lot of things which I've painstakingly investigated. It's just that I can't string every situation together, and I can't find any common points. They are pieces of a puzzle, and I can't find a connecting point. You've investigated the abyss mist? Did that thing show great harm from the beginning? Or did you notice something? No, I just think it's fun. Yin Nuashing. He felt that he had misjudged this guy from the very beginning. This was an old urchin who was even more mischievous than he was. He still had a playful heart, and he even went to investigate the abyssal death mist, which made people retreat just for fun. Seeing the strange look on his face, the white figure coughed. Well, it's for research purposes. But I wasn't a god back then, so I didn't understand a lot of things as well as I do now. What he said was not much different from what Yin Nuashing saw and knew. There were many special situations, and because there was no multiple of the same situation, he could not tell if there were such characteristics. Oh, I haven't asked you yet. Why did you suddenly ask about this? The white figure floated to the window and pushed it open. Outside was a complete galactic space, leading to a beautiful galactic space. This thing was taboo back then. It caused the entire void to be in chaos. The first realm and the other two realms were all damaged to varying degrees. The realm of the gods had encountered it before. Yin Nuashing frowned. Then why didn't I hear about it in the realm of the gods? Oh, it's probably because of the gap in history. After all, it was the war at the end of the era. The white figure nodded. Yin Nuashing sighed. Why do I have to ask? Because that thing is back. Puffed. Yin Nuashing leaned to the side to avoid a spit of energy. The white shadow widened his eyes, walked over, and patted him heavily on the shoulder. Take your time. Take a deep breath and relax. I know that a heavenly god who has reincarnated has a lot of worries. You can't let your mind be affected. If there's anything, we can talk about it slowly. Don't take your health lightly. Yin Nuashing waved his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I don't have time to entertain you. It's understandable that you don't believe me. But the truth is that the brick mixed with the void mist, or the abyssal death mist, is about to hit the realm of the gods. It took us a long time to find out that it might be related to the Dark Age. The white figure saw the serious look on his face and knew that he was telling the truth. The white light fell silent and flickered. This is serious. It seems that there are more than one or two families of ancient souls that survived. How serious is this? The white figure waved his hand and sighed. It's not serious. The result is about the same. There's something else I want to tell you. Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes and sat down on the bed. He nodded. Go on. I'm sitting. The day the abyssal death mist dissipates, that 1 hour, that 1 minute, that 10 seconds later, is the day that the eternal war of the ages began. Yin Nuashing was in a daze. He almost fell on the bed. Chapter 11:12. You're not joking, right? Yin Nuashing shuddered as he got up from his bed. He wanted to see if the white shadow was joking, but he was just a ball of white light. He did not even have a face. Naturally, his expression could not be seen. Yin Nuashing instinctively thought that these were two things, but his intuition told him that these were things that were strung together on a timeline. One was a warning that was similar to an omen, and the other was when the disaster broke out. How can there be so many jokes? The white shadow shrugged and slowly opened the other window. He sighed. This is the result of my own investigation. After combining all the recorded information, the most direct answer is that the eternal war broke out almost at the moment when the abyssal death shroud disappeared. People that have never been heard of and energy that has never been seen before appeared in the void along with the tide of darkness. Before this, no one knew about them at all. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air. There were things that appeared out of thin air. They were neither human nor ghost. They commanded the army of mutated monsters to sweep across the upper plane from the edge. They did not plunder or occupy. They only destroyed everything until there was nothing left. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. It sounded like a nightmare. The white shadow laughed softly. His tone was strange. A nightmare is more like a disaster. Before that, no one had expected it. No one had prepared for it. The war broke out just like that. The abyssal death shroud first appeared at the edge of the void, the edge of the lower plane. It destroyed countless worlds and turned countless lives into ashes. The outermost edge of the void, which is the lower plane, was flattened almost without any resistance. When it reached the upper plane, the tide of darkness moved out and pushed towards the core of the void, pushed across worlds one by one. Yin Nuoxing frowned. Let's not talk about patience first. Where would they find so many people to carry out such a large-scale war? They appeared out of thin air. The white shadow sighed faintly. They exist in any place. All matter and all energy in the world can cause them to appear. They appear out of thin air. As long as there is energy, they can appear continuously. Moreover, they are terrifyingly powerful. Those are just ordinary monsters that were created, but they have the power to flatten an entire lower plane. Even in the upper plane, it would require a great deal of effort to suppress it. Projection body, split body, split body. Yin Nuoxing thought of the tides of darkness that emerged from the void and the fog of the void. There was an endless army in the tides. Some of them were huge monsters that had been infected by something. The material was so simple that it made one's hair stand on end. It could be a broken finger, a piece of rock, or a grain of sand. Monsters that were transformed from such things were also formed by energy. There was no difference between the two types, but the ones they were facing were obviously weaker. They were so weak that even a slightly stronger demigod could kill them all. The white shadow saw his serious expression and couldn't help but ask, "Did you think of something?" There's no harm in saying it. Who knows? Maybe you'll be right by accident. Yin Nuoxing looked up. I think that it could be a split body of someone's energy. In other words, it's a split body made of energy. The core could be anything, but there would be no change in strength. Those are thousands of split bodies of some powerful being. What a coincidence. I think so too. That would explain where their endless army came from. In just a moment, they could replenish thousands or even hundreds of thousands of soldiers out of thin air. The tide of darkness that they form could flatten any world. The white shadow nodded. But that was during the Dark Age. You said that those ordinary monsters could flatten the infinite worlds of the lower plane. In fact, we have seen the endless tide of darkness, but it was not as powerful as we imagined. Any demigod could hold back the army for a while. The white shadow scratched his head. Maybe the component responsible for splitting the army was replaced. Maybe the master responsible for splitting the army died in the Great Reincarnation. Who knows? But if what you said is true, the tide of darkness this time is not too terrible. But these are just the ordinary cannon fodder. There are shining cannon fodder, high-level cannon fodder, more cannon fodder, more cannon fodder, and low-level manipulators, high-level manipulators, more manipulators, and the mastermind behind the scenes, the mastermind behind the mastermind, the mastermind of the mastermind, the mastermind of the mastermind. Well, that's more or less it. Well then. Ahem. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He shook his head hard. Then let's just assume that it's very strong first. I saw a scene in the illusion of a world being hit by the tide of darkness. It was a very vague scene. The warriors who were equal to the middle-level and high-level gods were killed and injured, and countless lives were displaced. The white shadow was stunned. Wait, you said, the tide of darkness has appeared? Yes. What's wrong? Yin Nuoxing looked at him confusedly. The tide of darkness rushed out after the abyss of death fog ended, because the abyss of death fog also had a great influence on them. Back then, a man took a piece of the abyss of death fog and used it to kill millions of soldiers of the tide of darkness after the abyss of death fog ended. The white shadow looked serious. Yin Nuoxing frowned. According to what the white shadow said, The tide of darkness could not have appeared together with the void fog. But in fact, the tide of darkness came from the void fog, or even from the void fog. After hearing what the white shadow said, the expression on his face almost jumped out. Then it's even more dangerous. If that's the case, first of all, we can be 100% sure that the tide of darkness has something to do with the abyss of death fog. Even if it's not caused by the tide of death fog, it has something to do with the tide of death fog. Secondly, the tide of darkness has solved the problem of the abyss of death fog, so they can do whatever they want. Oh, it's over. There are not many talents in this era. It's at the end of the decline of the natural order. What do they want to do by jumping out at this time? The white shadow did not know whether to laugh or cry. Logically speaking, they had already come out once at the end of the Dark Age. Even with all the forces in the upper plane, they were still unable to repel them, and were even mercilessly destroyed. At that time, they should have done whatever they wanted to do. The entirety Yuan realm should have been their world. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flickered. Either they did not achieve their goal back then, or it's something that needs to be done repeatedly. So, after almost 80 eras, they are ready to come back. I don't think it's possible. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and interrupted him. So, what do they want to do exactly? The white shadow nodded. Then, he asked tentatively, maybe they want to unify the 8 sectors? Pooh, don't talk about that. I'm a bit allergic to the word unify. My head hurts when I hear it. Even if you tell me that they are fanatics who want to ritually destroy the great Yuan sector after so many years, I'll believe you. What's wrong? Seeing him rolling his eyes, the white shadow was a little curious. There's a melon in the Pantheon that's ready to unite the Pantheon against the invaders, but it's doing it by opening its coffin and declaring war on all sides. So far, it seems that it's planning to shut the door and destroy its entire clan. I've been wondering if I should slap its face in 2 days and kick its ass into the cycle of reincarnation, but due to some special reason, I can't do that. Well, now you know why I came in with a dead face. It's annoying. It's annoying. The white shadow's tone was like an ancestor who came back to life to see his offspring die on the spot. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, he coughed dryly and waved his hand. Maybe that's the truth. But in fact, I didn't see them at the beginning of the 60th era. By the time I survived the void reset and returned, the primordial realm had been in the barren void for more than 100,000 years. There was nothing but the barren void and nothingness. There was nothing, no world lights, no them. Let's not talk about that. I don't know what they want to do anyway. If I did, I wouldn't have let them dominate the Dark Age. The white shadow sat on the edge of the bed and muttered to himself for a while before explaining in detail. The abyssal death shroud had already appeared before I ascended to heavenly God. As I said, it took a long time for them to push in from the edge of the void. At that time, I was already in the middle realm or the upper realm. My world was also sealed and hidden because of me, which was why it was not destroyed even though it was in the lower realm. When I returned, I discovered the endless shockwaves of destruction, leaving only the noises and hollow echoes of countless worlds dying in the void. I stayed in my world for 2 eras until I ascended to heavenly God in the 50th era, leaving behind an even stronger seal before heading to the middle realm. That was the first time I faced the abyssal death shroud head-on. I watched as it mercilessly crushed through the middle realm, destroying countless worlds. It was only when they reached the upper realm that the abyssal death shroud had completely faded, the tide of darkness erupted, and the eternal war lasted for 6 eras, pushing straight to the core of the void. How did you survive back then? Well, it's easy to imagine. In the 59th era, I was just a small beginner at the peak of a beginner star. I was besieged and seriously injured on the battlefield. It's unimaginable that I didn't die on the spot. I was forced to leave the battlefield passively and bumped into the space that was created to hide my world. I didn't expect that it would come in handy at that time. Perhaps I triggered something when I was about to die and was dragged back to that space. Normally, they should have caught a trace of space fluctuation and chased after me. However, the crazy counterattack from the entire 8 elements realm made them flurried. It was a bit difficult for them to push forward, so they didn't have time to care about me. When I almost recovered and wanted to take a look again, many years had passed. The place was already empty, and another war was waging in a distant place. In a hurry, I learned from some survivors that because the deity realm, the saint spirit realm, and the Changyuan realm joined in, the war was still going back and forth. For a period of time, they couldn't advance any further. Before I could be surprised by this news, and before I could go to the battlefield, I saw a flash of light that penetrated the void. The power that was so powerful that it penetrated all the rules was reflected in all the worlds. Even the place where the phantom bloomed was affected. You have to ask why, because I happened to be not far from where the phantom bloomed, and I fainted when the impact hit me. The white shadow let out a long sigh. I must have slept for a period of time. When I woke up again, it was not long before the void reset, which is the great reincarnation. I woke up in a hurry and endured the great reincarnation to preserve the world I was in. You know what happened after that? I died in the 68th era, came back in the 75th era, and spent 5 eras searching for that thing again. It was in the lower planes at that time, and I spent 10 million years painstakingly trying to deduce its location. During that time, I only recovered to the level of a lower deity, and I used the power of the divine right above the heavenly deity realm. It was the kind of overdraft that caused me to be half-crippled, and then I was blasted into reincarnation by the great reincarnation. I have to say, the great reincarnation of the primordial age was really powerful. Sigh, great reincarnation, great reincarnation. Yin Nuoxing said, I don't think that's what it means. The white shadow chuckled and continued. After that, it was the 82nd era. He came back with a body full of injuries, and it was difficult for him to survive until now. During that time, he died and was reborn. But after that, the reincarnation period was not that long, and he returned to the 8 elemental realm. He was quite lucky. Yin Nuoxing could not help but sigh. They were both reincarnated, and the white shadow could go back and forth in the 8 elemental realm. Why did he have to be chased into the reincarnation and go all the way down? The white shadow sighed. After going back and forth, I came back to the starting point, and I have to face that thing again. To be honest, I really don't want to see that black monster again. It was not easy to escape the nightmare there, and I have to face it again in this era. The withering of the rules is not over yet, and there is still a period of time before the rules will rebound. TSK, now, I really hope. Yin Nuoxing lay back on the bed, and his upper body was spread out. If my deduction is wrong, and there are only 10 days left before the reversal of the rules will happen. Oh, you're also wavering. Unfortunately, there's still about 1,000 years left. The white shadow shook his head and pointed at Yin Nuoxing. Also, you're pressing on my stomach. Yin Nuoxing said, no wonder it is a little soft. Seeing that he moved to another position on the bed and continued to lie down, the white shadow sighed again. He did not know how many times they had sighed. Even if there are only 10 days left, what can you do in that period of time? I heard you talking about that brick, right? It will fall in about 5 months. What can you do in these 5 months? I can find some loopholes, all kinds of loopholes. After all, it is just a temporary measure. If they come back again, the entirety Yuan realm will have no power to resist this time. The 8 Yuan realms are already like this, so there's no need to think about the lower Yuan realm. No matter how strong you are, even if it is me, if I am alone, it is impossible for me to fight against the tide of darkness. It is better than dying. I am afraid that I will become a Buddha and ascend to heaven immediately. Yin Nuoxing said, Is that so then? He sighed heavily and got up from the bed, feeling both physically and mentally exhausted. Tell me, I feel like there is nothing I can do now. This feeling is really uncomfortable. There is no other way. There is really no other way. As long as they mention that inhuman thing, with the current state of the Yuan realm, it is only a matter of time before it falls. No one. God, to be able to stop that inhuman, even if it is above the divine realm, it is useless. It is a difference of 2 levels. Bain was a little agitated. After a while, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. To be honest, I feel even worse than you. I have reached the level above the divine realm, but every time I think about that beam of light that I saw from a great distance, the beam of light that fell from the sky, I feel like my spirit is about to collapse. Reaching the divine realm is like a joke. Just focusing and thinking about it seriously will make me feel like this. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes at him. You should be content. I can't even touch that broken path right now. At least you crossed it. But what you said, that means there's still a path beyond Empyrean God. There is. I can promise you that. After all, I am already standing here, but I don't feel like I have touched the clouds. We have just been crawling from underground to the surface. We think that we have reached a new world, but we can't see the sky. It is the thing that really stands in the clouds. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but bury her pale face in the soft bed. She wailed in distress. I'm going crazy. Bai couldn't help but smile bitterly. After knowing the truth, he didn't feel any better than Yin Nuashing. He even wondered why he had persisted for dozens of years. The underground that he couldn't finish climbing, the tower that he couldn't build, and the sky that he could never reach. Even the stars had lost their luster and were hidden behind the deep isolation zone by the endless brownish-yellow color. I shouldn't have touched that thing dozens of years ago. Yin Nuashing got up from the bed and sighed in distress. If I had done that, I might have reached a higher place by now. Sigh. Do you regret it? No, I'm just lamenting. The word regret does not exist in my dictionary. I don't have the time to regret anything. It is unnecessary. Stubborn persistence. Bai stood up and pushed open the fifth window. What are you going to do? Nothing. Yin Nuashing got up from the bed like a carp and stretched. I will continue to move forward. I will deal with whatever comes my way. But I don't have any soldiers or generals. I only have me. When thousands of stars light up the void, it is the time to announce the end, whether it is mine or the enemy's. Bai laughed strangely. This answer is very much your style. When Yin Nuashing opened his eyes, he saw a dignified and elegant face that was very close to him. He was a little stunned. After a while, he habitually reached out and rubbed Xiao Qing's long hair. He slowly sat up and asked, What are you doing? Xiao Qing blinked and smiled gently. Nothing. I saw you deep in thought and frowning, so I wanted to come out and see what's wrong with you. It's been 2 hours. After that, she sat behind Yin Nuashing and put her soft hands on his shoulders. Is there something bothering you? There's something bothering me everywhere. Yin Nuashing sighed bitterly. The more I know, the more bothersome I get. I thought I could learn something from that guy. Yes, I did learn a lot of things. But I didn't expect that at the same time, I uncovered a more complicated inside story. Yin Nuashing enjoyed Xiao Qing's massage. His tone was a little lazy. Where are Ming and the others? They just came once. When they saw that your consciousness had not returned, they wanted to stay and take care of you. But they were all pulled away by the people of the sanctum. I heard something happened. Yin Nuashing thought for a while. He felt that he knew too much. If he did not say it out loud, he would feel uncomfortable. So, he told Xiao Qing everything in a soft voice. Little Qing listened very quietly without making a sound. Her hands didn't stop moving either. Seeing the worry on his face slowly fading away as he poured out his thoughts, she couldn't help but smile slightly. Just slowly spit it out like this. There's no need to hold it in. There's never a lack of things happening around Little Star. Xiao Qing could not help but chuckle. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and muttered, If you want to say that I'm a troublemaker, just say it. Anyway, it's the truth. Damn it. I'm even suspecting that my ability to find trouble is an irreversible attribute from the concept layer of the rules. It's the will of the Deyuan realm. Why do you think I've run into so many things? It wasn't easy to seal a bunch of big guys, and now that we've come back, we've run into them again. Dozens of eras have been wasted, and they might come back again. That brick is still rushing here, and it's related to the Dark Age, the Void Mist, and the Tide of Darkness. Screw you. It's going to take 1,000 years for the rules to wither. Who do you think I've offended? I can't do anything even if I have the power. Yin Nuashing knew that it was useless for him to complain. He just could not help but want to complain. It was said that when heaven was about to give a great responsibility to a great man, it would first make him miserable. He felt that he was miserable enough. Moreover, he did not want to take on such a great responsibility from heaven. He even wanted to yell, F***ck off, and then he would be busy saving the world from disaster. Saving the world was none of his business. Yin Nuashing just wanted to live a quiet life. Why did so many things have to be put on his head? And he had to do it. He could not control himself. He felt that he was a little cheap. After he finished scolding, he only heard Little Qing's soft and gentle laughter. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and did not say anything. This female housekeeper was only listening to his troubles. She did not intend to say anything to touch him. At this moment, he felt a little relaxed. If it were Chu Yingxian, she would be scolding him. Xian and Ming would persuade him to relax a little. Feng, and Bing would give him advice. Yu would probably shout and kill him, and the others would be in charge of making a fuss. According to the current progress, he felt that lying in Little Qing's arms and enjoying her massage was already a luxury. He knew that it was time to get up and work. However, he still could not help but want to rest for a while. After resting for half an hour, Yin Nuashing reluctantly struggled to sit up. He did not know when the smooth and cold dragon tail wrapped around his waist. He smiled at Little Qing and said, "The time to enjoy is over." Little Qing blinked and smiled gently. "Are you going to continue fighting for this world?" "Ha, for the world or something. I can't bear such a noble and grand thing. I don't want to think about these sacred things." Yin Nuashing waved his hand and walked to the edge of the round platform at the top. He took off the soul-fixing bracelet. His long, colorful hair loosened and fell to the ground. "I just have my own things to do." Chapter 11:13. The stars shone with a mysterious light, tirelessly releasing light and heat. The light from billions of years ago shone on Yin Nuashing's colorful eyes, and his two diamond-shaped pupils shone like two fragments of the star domain. He sat on the edge of the round platform with his legs bent, looking up at the bright starry sky in the dark night. There was a faint white belt of light at the end of his sight, but his eyes were ethereal and untraceable. He didn't look at any corner of the world, but just stared blankly in that direction. His 7-meter-long, colorful hair emitted a faint glow as it casually draped over the ground beside him. However, it did not appear messy. The faint glow seemed to stretch to the end, causing his entire person to be shrouded in a layer of gentle light. Xiaoqing sat on the stone platform, wearing a tight green qipao. A few strands of her hair were tied into small ponytails, but most of it was casually draped over her shoulders. Beside her was a small, soft blanket, and little purple soul was sleeping soundly beside her. From time to time, she would let out weak, sleep-talking noises. The little girl was not wary of anyone. As long as it was someone who had entered Yin Nua planet, she would be very intimate with them. Xiaoqing and her had not known each other for long, but they had unknowingly become so close. When Xian and Feng arrived at the top of the temple, this was what they saw. There was a wide circular platform hundreds of meters wide. Except for a row of pillars in the outer circle, there was no cover. There were no gorgeous decorations or rune embellishments, and only some threads condensed by energy hung down from the pillars. This place was full of a tranquil atmosphere. Although night had fallen, there were still energy sparks in some places, and the young people were still releasing their excess energy. This place was like a quiet island isolated from the rest of the world, a sharp contrast to the turbulent outside. At the edge of the platform, the figure that made them fall in love with him was sitting quietly with his arms around his knees. The starlight shone on his side face, and the beautiful dark purple patterns on his face were shining brightly. He was so beautiful that he didn't belong to a man at all. He was wearing clothes flowing with the color of the starry sky, like a princess who had just come out of a wedding. There was a faint smile on his face, but it was also a bit deep, as if he had entered meditation and didn't notice their arrival. His astonishingly long and gorgeous multicolored hair flowed down his back like a waterfall and spread out on the ground, causing a layer of multicolored ripples to form, and it was as if he was sitting in a pool of water that sparkled with immortal light. When Xian and Feng saw this scene that violated some rules but seemed normal at the same time, they were both stunned. The platform was filled with a warm atmosphere, which made people want to completely relax. There were no noisy ripples in their hearts, and the faint whispers of the star, domain, sounded in their ears, sacred and pure. They knew that the man in front of them was more of a madman who released violence on the battlefield, but they couldn't deny that when he showed them this side of himself, they felt relaxed and comfortable just by being close to him. It was different from the usual peace and tranquility when they stayed by his side. This kind of feeling was incomparably sacred, and no one could associate him with the other side. This made them subconsciously reduce the volume of their voices and carefully walk over, afraid to disturb the peace and tranquility here. Xian carefully stood a little further away and stealthily set up the drawing board. Feng glanced at her and shook her head helplessly. She knew that Xian actually liked to draw, especially yin nuashing. Recently, she had been practicing speed drawing and planned to use 10 seconds to draw Yun Nuashing's heroic figure when he was fighting. However, she had not made any progress so far. His light element was too fast, and it was impossible to see it with the naked eye. All she could see was a blur of light and ash, and then the battle was over. Xian was quickly drawing this scene, recording the person who brought absolute peace to the platform. He might not feel anything, but they knew that a little star who could be completely quiet to this extent was really too rare. If this was a scenery, it probably involved the domain of rules and affected the absolute peace of reality. Are you done drawing? Just as Xian stopped drawing and felt very satisfied, a faint smile suddenly sounded directly in their minds. The two girls immediately raised their heads and saw Yun Nuashing slowly turning his head, his 2-meter-long hair fluttering, and his eyes containing the color of the starry sky quietly looking at them. Xian and Feng stuck out their tongues, looked at each other, and slowly moved over. Are you meditating? Kind of. Yin Nuashing smiled and did not stand up. He stretched out his hand and patted the seat next to him. Come and sit down. Xian and Feng looked at each other. They felt that Yin Nuashing looked very different at this moment, but they still obediently moved over, carefully avoided the colorful long hair spread on the ground, and sat down next to him. At this moment, they also felt a sense of relief in their hearts. Feng on the other hand, couldn't sit still. She grabbed a handful of long hair on the ground and tied it around her body, almost tying it with her own hair. Yin Nuashing reached out and patted Feng's head, then tilted his head and glanced at Xian. There were traces of battle on her robe, but it was obviously carefully arranged, so she didn't look disheveled. He didn't need to ask anything. He sensed some changes in her aura and understood everything. He never regarded them as burdens or vases, although he originally planned to protect them as vases, and if anyone dared to say a few words, he would greet them with Shinto. However, later on, he found that these girls were each stronger than the other and stubborn, so he gave up on that idea. When he came back to his senses, he realized that they were all strong enough to take care of themselves, and they didn't need his protection. They just liked to stick to him, and this was something that couldn't be changed. Mei Mao fluttered her fan and turned her head to look at Yin Nuashing. He had been looking up at the starry sky, but she could feel that part of his attention was on her, which made her a little curious. What are you looking at? The existence of this world, the destruction and birth of stars, the end of the world, and the echoes of the void. Searching for the truth. Yin Nuashing shook his head. There is no truth in the world. Every world is just placed in front of you. People try to use their own knowledge to speculate and theorize about the world, and in the end, what they find is the truth. But it doesn't exist. The world just exists there. There are 100 billion lives, 100 billion worldviews, and 100 billion truths, so it doesn't exist. The reassuring and relaxing atmosphere gradually calmed Feng down. She leaned lazily on Yin Nuashing's shoulder, her eyelids drooping. She couldn't help but want to fall asleep. She liked to listen to him, but she didn't hear a word he said. Xian didn't feel drowsy. Instead, she was a little energetic. She looked at Yin Nuashing with a strange expression. The latter also noticed her expression, and his ethereal voice softly came out. There are still sounds of restlessness in the world, madness, noise, and restlessness in the world. They are shouting, crying for help, wailing, desperate, lonely, and unprecedentedly huge thoughts are chaotically attacking the void. The world has become chaotic. Xian was confused. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but chuckle. Don't you understand? Xian nodded vigorously. Anyway, she couldn't understand most of what he said. It was too profound. She thought for a moment and said, "But I want to see the world that little star sees." Yin Nuoxing didn't seem surprised by her words. Maybe he had expected it. He just smiled faintly. "It's very boring. There's nothing special. When you lift all the curtains in front of you, the colors fade away, the illusions fade away, and only the essence of emptiness and the gradual change of madness is exposed in front of you. That's the world I see." He paused for a moment and then smiled. "But if it's you, maybe you can see a different scene. The projection of thousands of worlds should naturally be different in the eyes of others." Huh? Xian didn't hear the last sentence clearly. She couldn't help but be stunned. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and looked at her calmly. "Do you want to see it?" Xian nodded without hesitation. He smiled slightly, picked her up from the side, and held her in his arms. He put his chin on her head, and the light of the stars spread from his body to hers. "Through my eyes observe this boundless void. It is incomparably vast and boundless. It contains countless mysteries. Even if we are heavenly gods, even if our consciousness can instantly spread across an entire world, we are still unable to completely explore it." Endless information poured into her mind through her eyes. It was like a sea of stars smashing into her mind. Xian couldn't even see clearly what she was looking at. She couldn't bear 1/1000th of the information. The huge amount of information just flashed through her eyes, and it was all transferred to Yin Nuoxing's mind. She just looked at it blankly, and she couldn't even remember too much. Too many things flashed past, and too much information poured into her mind in disorder. Just this information, this memory, was enough to drown a god. In the boundless darkness, countless rays of light flickered, forming a net that extended to the end of one's line of sight. Eternity, the void, was eternal. Its unchanging body had been silent for countless years, but she seemed to have felt something. It was very vague, very complicated, and she could not understand it at all. The cold, absolutely empty void seemed to have produced some kind of throbbing, as if something was making it feel uneasy. That feeling made her feel uneasy as well, and her heart palpitated. There's a change in the void. It's become irritable and restless. Yin Nuoxing's voice sounded directly in Xian's mind, startling her. She didn't see him beside her, but she calmed down quickly. Her eyes swept across the endless void and the infinite world. She saw the moment when the world was born, the moment when the world fell apart, the gathering and dispersing of star clusters, the birth and death of stars. The newborn planet was just a hot rock with nothing. Most of the destroyed planets were the same. Some were so cold that they were about to freeze, and some were as hot as hell. Her line of sight seemed to be fixed on the scene. Thousands of stars were turbulent and flickering. The extremely bright light lit up the fire that lit up the star field. This light could even affect the void. Xian's line of sight gradually drifted. She focused on the huge cluster of light from the galaxy. Through the layers of dazzling light, she could vaguely see an incomparably familiar figure standing in the center. Beautiful, noble, and with long, colorful hair, it was extremely bright under the endless starlight. Billions of stars flowed continuously with him as the center. He stood in the center of that pitch-black background. His body was surrounded by the light of billions of stars. With one hand on his waist, his expression was indifferent. That pair of indifferent eyes passed through the blockade of endless starlight and looked into the distance. Xian drifted towards the cluster of stars and came to his side. It was just a shadow formed by the condensation of thousands of starlight. She wasn't really standing there, but her line of sight was here. She followed his line of sight and saw a place extremely far away. Through the barrier of the void, she saw a huge cluster of flickering world lights. The originally transparent cluster of world lights was filled with black mist. Strange energy waves emanated from that world, and the connected cluster of world lights was gradually dyed with that strange black color. She had seen the void fog once before in the crack in the burning Yin Mountain. However, it was not accurate to say that she had seen it before. From the beginning to the end, she could not tell which part of the black space was the void and which part was the void fog. She could only say that she had seen it face to face. The void mist is still in the lower plane, and it's still there for the time being. Ever since its judgment mechanism lowered the degree of destruction, which was originally only targeted at high-level worlds, that is, worlds with strong rules, it has slowly lowered the level of destruction of the targets. More and more worlds are being affected, and the speed of destruction in the distant void zone is gradually increasing. The speed of its spread may be faster than during the Dark Age. The higher the plane it spreads to, the lower the degree of destruction of the unknown judgment mechanism, and it only targets worlds with sufficiently strong laws. However, it can be observed that it is appearing frequently and is slowly spreading. Unable to observe, raising the level of divine right to the heavenly gods. Unable to analyze, above the heavenly gods, cutting off the void, sealing the plane. Ineffective, a voice kept echoing in her ears. It sounded like a strange sound of energy vibrations, and it was not Yin Nuoxing's voice. Xian turned his head. He was also listening, and he did not respond. The entire starry sky fell silent. Occasionally, strange sounds from billions of stars could be heard. It was not until a few minutes later that he said, "Got it, old man. I'll leave the edge of the void to you. I have to deal with the upcoming mess in the realm of the gods first." The energy vibrating voice was a little speechless. "Be careful. Everything is different from the Dark Age. The tide of darkness may erupt in the realm of the gods first." Yin Nuo planet replied something, but she could not hear it clearly. The surrounding scene became blurry, and the light quickly faded away. He also disappeared into the starry sky, and the surroundings suddenly became pitch black. She could feel her line of sight quickly penetrating into the void. A strange light flashed past the corner of her line of sight, and a strange phenomenon appeared in the dead void. It only lasted for a moment, and she did not have time to see it clearly before it passed. It seemed that she had crashed into a world of light. Xian calmed herself and opened her eyes. What she saw was a starry sky shrouded in black fog. Strange phenomena unfolded one after another in front of her. A strange sun occupied a large area of space in front of her. This sun was bigger than any sun she had ever seen. Its light was dazzling, but it did not affect her vision. She could also easily see its shape. It was not a regular sphere. Its surface was uneven and bumpy. There were hundreds of spherical bulges, and each bulge had its own strange movement. It was as if the sun had been torn apart, and each part was trying its best to keep moving, resulting in this strange phenomenon. Xian squinted her eyes slightly. She realized that she could see what was happening to the sun. Her vision was changing automatically. She could see many things in front of her. Those were the phenomena that appeared after her brain processed them. They were not actual images. She could tell that there was originally only one sun in this oddly shaped sun. However, due to the rupture of the timeline, the suns of different times appeared at the same time. Due to the problem of space, they did not overlap on the same horizontal line. Instead, they formed this chaotic superposition. There was a planet in this galaxy. It should have been complete, and there should have been countless lives on the planet. If there was a race of humans, perhaps not long ago, there would have been a celebration. But now, only 1/3 of the planet was left. The scorching core of the planet was exposed to the galaxy, and the scorching red light was dazzling. The remaining 2/3, Xian tilted her head. They were evenly arranged in a ring around the fat sun. There were no fragments, and they were not blown up. They were just separated, taken apart piece by piece like a jigsaw puzzle. Each piece was complete, but they were no longer connected. The planet was still alive on the level of laws. It was still a complete planet, but space and time were separated. There were sparse stars in orbit further away, but they were no longer visible. Those were the other planets of this galaxy, and they had even disappeared in the real world, leaving only the existence of laws. The sun and its planets here had encountered the void shroud. Even if the latter had merely flashed past like a specter and did not stay here, the small planetary system was already in shambles and shattered. The calamity was only on the surface and directly affected reality, and while the rules were still intact, the space was no longer complete as a whole. It was a minor calamity caused by a flash of the void shroud, and its essence was enough to destroy an entire world or even the entire void. Her gaze lingered there for a few minutes before Xian sighed softly. She should have been surprised or even a little afraid, but she did not feel that way. It was as if another person had taken over her emotions, so that she did not have to care so much as to continue walking fearlessly into the depths of the void. There would be many disasters waiting for her ahead. It was not a beautiful scene from the start. Xian sighed softly and returned to the void. She could not help but feel a sense of endless emptiness and loneliness. Looking at the space that was still dark and empty, she even felt that she was the only one left in this world. She had forgotten that she was looking at the world with Yun Nuoxing's eyes and was not really in the void. The shift of vision came without warning. She had inadvertently gone to another place and saw what was happening on the other side of the world at the same time. She saw a shattered galaxy, a half-erased sun, 4 or 5 worlds' luminous clusters that were forcefully kneaded into a ball. The world barrier had vanished, but they were all intact and unaffected. However, she also saw scenes of substantial destruction, an epic battle from above. The tides of darkness flattened an entire planet, swept across a planetary system, and countless lives rose in resistance. She was only looking down at it all from the highest vantage point. Blood flowed across the land, but it was all too far away from her and untouchable. She could only watch as life futilely faded away without feeling anything, and her cold heart did not have a single ripple. The glorious history and the glorious kingdoms were all meaningless and would not have any emotions. The tides of darkness and the army of darkness that filled the entire world were nothing but killing machines that would not stop until death. The various miracles and contradictions of life became chaotic at this boundary. The world seemed to develop in a circle, reaching the peak of the timeline only to cause you to fall to the bottom of the valley all at once. Everything would return to the origin, to the void, leaving nothing behind. The more she saw, the more obvious this feeling became. As she walked through the distorted and chaotic time, the disorder of time led to confusion in her senses. She could always feel the flow of time, as if she was stepping on broken petals with a time difference of billions of years between 2 petals. She kept wandering through the planetary system and the void, blurring the concept of time. She seemed to know what the worldview of the heavenly gods was like, or at least touched upon some of it. As she wandered through the long passage of time, the first thing she lost was the so-called time. 1,000 years passed in an instant, but it was merely seconds. When she looked back, the world had changed and everything had changed. She knew that it was caused by the temporal turbulence in Yun Nuoxing's vision. Not much time had passed in reality, but she could not help but put herself in the shoes of a bystander who could not do anything, even if she was just wandering between the stars and worlds. Yes, bystander. All of them were bystanders. At that very moment, so many things were happening across the void, and yet not many knew about it. They could not even be considered bystanders. If the calamity did not spread before them, none of them would have thought about it. Heavenly gods, it's already 1,000 worlds, right? The void is endless. How long has it been? Xian stretched and muttered to herself. She watched the sun in front of her disintegrate under the devouring of the tide of darkness, erupting with the most violent impact in the star field. It swept across this galaxy and sent the light to the end of the starry sky. She couldn't help but sigh. She couldn't remember how many worlds she had seen. She only remembered 1,000, but in reality, she should have seen more. Only 10 minutes have passed. A kind voice rang in her heart, causing Xian to cry out in surprise. She was just talking to herself and did not expect Yun Nuoxing to respond to her. When she heard the content of the voice clearly, She could not help but mutter, "But I feel like it's been a few years, so long, and you're not by my side." When Yin Nuashing heard this slightly coquettish voice, she could not help but laugh helplessly. As she laughed, the endless starry sky in her eyes faded, and soon it completely turned black. She felt that she was being rapidly pulled back by a force, and it only took a few flashes of time. When she opened her eyes again, what she saw was still the same starry sky. She leaned into a warm embrace that made her feel very at ease. Welcome back. Chapter 11:14. Xian could still see the stars in the sky, but not only that, she could also see a few white pillars from the corner of her eye. Still a little confused, she sighed. The heavenly god's view of the world is too terrifying. Was the endless time that passed in her senses only 10 minutes in reality? She had traversed countless worlds and galaxies, vividly seeing the sunrise and sunset, as well as the mortal nations being destroyed in their resistance. Her thoughts of indignation and anger almost roared to the point of collapsing the void, but it was useless. Under the oppression of absolute power, all mortal resistance was futile. Even gods would fall in the tide of darkness, let alone mere mortals of a few thousand worlds. The Void Shroud was more like a natural disaster that belonged to the void. However, it was more likely to be a man-made disaster. She directly faced the Void Shroud and saw the tide of darkness. The power of thousands of worlds was so fragile that it could be blown away with a single breath. Even though she had retracted her gaze, in the faraway parts of the void where she could not see, such things were still playing out without stopping. Yin Nuashing felt her emotions, but changed the topic. How do you feel? How does it feel to see the world with the eyes of a heavenly god? Xian shrunk her neck, lowered her head, and muttered, "It's so scary." Huh? Yin murmured what she had seen in the last 10 minutes. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing was stunned and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said, "Girl, I just lent my eyes to you, but what you want to see is up to you. Those scenes and those things are what you want to see and what you want to know." This time, it was Xian's turn to be stunned. She blinked and tilted her head. Huh? Yin Nuashing didn't pay any attention to the girl's cutesy act. He tapped her head and said, "You should know about this by now, and I don't intend to hide it from you. You're not chicks that need my protection, so it's fine if you know. It's not a bad idea to let you come into contact with the world of the gods early on. Well, it feels good to be protected. Come on, Ming told me that the girl was almost as crazy as me when she was in the Void Rift. Without her, I would have lost control in minutes." Xian. Yin Nuashing pinched her cheeks and sighed. "You don't learn from me. I'm not a good role model. I'm not a good role model from all aspects. You might as well say that I'm a negative example. One is marked by the company one keeps. One is black by the company one keeps. One is crazy by the company one keeps." Yin Nuashing. He felt like there was an old curse stuck in his throat that he couldn't spit out, and his pretty face turned red. Look at Nightmare and Ewer. They become crazier and crazier after getting close to Little Star. They even hit their own people when they go crazy, Xian said with a grin. Yin Nuashing slapped her forehead. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If that was the case, they were considered to have strong self-control. Still, don't say any more. I was wrong. I was really wrong. Seeing that this young lady still wanted to say something, Yin Nuashing quivered and covered her mouth. Cold sweat flowed all over his body as he hurriedly coughed dryly. "Don't make a fuss. Don't make a fuss. Let's quickly rest tonight. You've just received that ancient spirit godly phoenix. Hurry up and familiarize yourself with it. Tomorrow. Oh, there's still things to do today. We're counting the hours now." Speaking of this, Xian suddenly felt a little depressed. The ancient spirit godly phoenix. Its power has always been suppressed by Feng'er, although it's quite powerful and has the strength of a divine emperor. But, after all, it's just a bloodline formed by the four gods of celestial phenomenon. How can it not be suppressed when it meets the real master? Maybe there really is a monster with a trace of the four gods' bloodline. In the ancient times, There were forces that hunted the four gods. At that time, Yin Nuashing said in a hurry. When she blurted out the last sentence, she felt that the air had frozen. Xian was stunned. Feng, and Qing, both turned to look at him in surprise. However, at this time, the reassuring aura around him was still there. It just made them feel a little uneasy. But when they heard this topic, their hearts still jumped. Whether it was a story or a legend, this kind of thing was like a horror story to them. Yin Nuashing's face twitched. She knew that she said something wrong. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. She rubbed Feng, head and looked at Qing. Her voice was a little apologetic. Well, forget it. Just pretend that I didn't say anything. Basically, those guys didn't survive back then. However, his words seemed to have evoked Xiaoqing's memories. Her green eyes became a little hazy and misty. Some memory fragments that existed in her bloodline inadvertently surged out, but they were not specific memories. They were just some emotions, lamentation, sorrow, and some hatred. She seemed to know why those people's eyes looked so familiar. It turned out that she had experienced it as early as in the ancient era. Perhaps even earlier, in the previous era and the beginning of this era, she might have secretly done it as well. It was just that they did not know. They only knew bits and pieces of things that happened in these 2 years. Qing, a soft and ethereal call pulled her out of her daze. She suddenly came back to her senses. Yun Nuashing's beautiful, colorful eyes were right in front of her eyes. He said softly, "Don't dwell on the memories of the past. You don't have to worry about those things happening again. In this world, no one can take anyone away from me. As long as I don't agree, no one can." His words were very firm. He seemed to be very calm, but in fact, he was panicking. Ever since he knew that there were people above the gods in this world, he felt very weak. He hadn't felt this kind of uncontrollable feeling for many years, and it made him feel very uncomfortable. But at this time, no matter how weak he felt, he had to hold on. Qing blinked at Mei Mao, smiled softly, and nodded her chin. "Okay." Patting the girl's head, Yin Nuashing heaved a sigh of relief. He felt a little awkward in his heart, not to mention the fact that this stupid female housekeeper usually had the appearance of a domineering elder sister. On the contrary, it was him who looked soft and weak. He felt that their positions should be reversed. The reassuring atmosphere around him gradually dissipated. Xian and Feng skillfully tidied up his long hair and tied it up with the soul-stabilizing bracelet. The latter didn't have any emotional fluctuations because of that sentence, which made him feel a little relieved, but she still comforted him. "Boss, I don't have time now." The temple master has. Nightmare casually walked to the top of the temple, scratching the back of his head as he walked. As soon as he walked up, he saw a scene that he would never forget in his life. He saw Qing hugging Yin Nuashing tightly, and Yin Nuashing was holding Feng in his arms and saying comforting words. Xian was watching from the side, with a gentle smile on her beautiful face. When this scene fell into the eyes of those who were paying attention, it changed the meaning of this scene. The four people on the top of the temple were stunned. The moment 5 pairs of eyes met, the air froze. Nightmare looked dignified and holy. He put his palms together and chanted a Taoist name. "I didn't see anything." Then, as if time had turned back, he scratched the back of his head and retreated. As soon as he disappeared from sight, he shouted at the top of his voice, "Good luck to the world. Come back here." Yin Nuashing was about to cry. If this scene was seen by the second brother of the Big Mouth trio, who knew how twisted it would be a light punishment for his wisdom in this life to be ruined. It would definitely be passed down in the 9 temples for millions of years. About 10 minutes later, Yin Nuashing carried Nightmare, who was tied up like a mummy, into the main hall of the Golden Temple. She said that she had something to discuss, so a group of people sat lazily on the sofa. However, the people were not all there. Some of the temple masters were not there, while the great elders were there. On the other hand, the temple masters were not there. Anyway, it was a perfect 9 people. Looking at the situation, Yin Nuashing guessed that it was not a particularly important matter, so she relaxed. She threw Nightmare onto the sofa in the corner of the hall. Yuan Shi and Chu Chan saw that he could not move, so they took the opportunity to press him down on the sofa and beat him up. Xian and the others also went over to the table of juniors. Yin Nuoxing came in front of Princess Jean and the others. She said, "Sister Jean, Sister Shui, are you looking for me?" Princess Jean, Ning Qinxue, and the others sat up straighter when they saw that the person in question had arrived. Princess Jean nodded and said, "Little star, the second god has made a move." Yin Nuoxing's expression became serious when she heard this. She sat down calmly and said, "Which family is the second god? The one who went to the Yuan and Qin families to show off? Or the Yuan Sky clan from the Southern Plains? Or—" The Golden Crown Princess paused for a moment, then said, "Then it's the third one. It's the Great Spirit clan, who claimed that they wanted to unify the realm of the gods. 2 hours ago, they reached the northern wilderness and found the Xian family and the Yu family." Uffed. Yin Nuoxing spat out the tea that she had just sipped. "By the way, the one who messed with the Yuan and Qin families is a force called the Sacred Immortal Pavilion. They call themselves the Sacred Immortal Clan. The Origin Sky Clan is a heavenly god force left behind from the late ancient era, while the Great Spirit Clan was left behind from the late ancient era. At that time, they had already hidden themselves from the world," the Golden Queen said. "Later stages of the ancient era. It's in a long time. That guy can't have a breakthrough, right?" Hall Master Lei frowned. Yin Nuoxing had just finished coughing. She waved her hand and said, "The only time it can have a breakthrough is during the later stages of the ancient era. It's easy to think about hiding and storing power. However, in this era, breaking through to the heavenly god realm is the limit of the limit. It's a fluke. After breaking through, it can't even think about moving forward. The laws of heaven and earth have already allowed them to forcefully break through to the heavenly god realm. Even if they can continue to move, they won't be able to move forward even a centimeter. As for the time of 7 or 8 eras, well, if the laws of heaven and earth that I've deduced are not wrong, this amount of time is enough to create a peak heavenly god in the early stages of the ancient era. In the ancient era, it's very difficult. However, it won't be a problem for it to take 2 or 3 steps forward." Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment. After a while, she shook her head and said, "It doesn't matter. To deal with that level, we'll definitely have to use a defensive formation. It's not like I haven't killed anyone above the heavenly god realm. Everyone." What a domineering statement. According to what you said, there are 2 other heavenly god forces in the god realm. However, they don't have any plans to come out. Therefore, we can't find any information about them. As Princess Jean spoke, Mei Mao stared at her and said, "Actually, I'm very curious. Where did those heavenly gods who stood at the peak of the heavenly god realm go? During that era, no one should have been able to kill them. Either they were affected by the great samsara and struggled at death's door for more than 10 eras before disappearing, or they died directly in the great samsara, or they survived and hid somewhere." Yin Nuoxing took a sip of tea to soothe his throat. The great samsara of the high ancient era was unimaginably powerful. This is a piece of information that I've obtained. The majority of the great samsara of the high ancient era had most likely already fallen. The heavenly god realm experts that were fortunate enough to survive would definitely have reached a certain level of power. The laws of the high ancient era were clearly declining, but creating several thousand heavenly gods and peak heavenly gods shouldn't be an issue. As for where they went, I'm not sure either. Can't heavenly gods ignore the great samsara? Ning Qinxue was slightly stunned. No, even Empyrean gods will be killed by the great samsara. This is the ultimate activity of the great primordial realm. It aims to destroy all the worlds and all life in the great primordial realm. According to an insider, even those above the Empyrean god realm might fail miserably, not to mention the physical spirit. As you know, the realm of the gods has survived the devastation of several great samsara because of the protection of the pillar of creation. Even so, a large part of the realm of the gods was blown up. Everyone's cheeks twitched. Let's not talk about this for now. If you're interested, just live until the end of this era. Yin Nuoxing shook her long hair and looked at Princess Jean. Sister Jean, do you have something else to say? Princess Jean nodded. After an intense discussion between the Xian family and the Yu family for 2 hours, they've decided to move their nest. That's good. You'll be responsible for this. The formation map I left behind should be enough. Yin Nuoxing agreed without hesitation. After all, these families have been on good terms for dozens of years. Even if they didn't talk about this first, his plan to preserve the living forces was also in preparation. In the case that the others were not reliable, he had to pull up a backup force himself. Whether it was to resist the devil race or the tide of darkness, he needed such a backup force. Hall Master lay spread out his hands and showed an expression of "I knew it." We just want to ask for your opinion first. We know that you don't like to manage these, wishy-washy things. However, it's better to ask about some important matters first. Yin Nuoxing shook her head. You can manage it. However, if you want to say something, do everything possible to accumulate strength. There will be a war of survival in the future. We need to prepare from now on. Hall Master Shui sensitively caught something. She couldn't help but swallow. About the survival of what? Yin Nuoxing's forehead darkened. He let out an inhuman laugh. The De Yuan world. The hall instantly became dead silent. Everyone knew that the darker Yin Nuoxing's face was, the more serious the matter was. They felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. This place was too big, and the level was too high. Was this a battlefield that they could participate in? Actually, I have the same thoughts as you. It's better to destroy the De Yuan world. Yin Nuoxing sighed. Everyone shook their heads hard. No, we haven't thought about it. Yin Nuoxing continued. However, some shit can't be escaped forever. Even if you can escape forever, you still can't escape the end of the world. I'll tell you the specific situation after I've sorted it out. Now, let's do what we need to do first. I'm going to meet the person I need to meet. He sighed and stood up. He scratched his head hard. Everyone looked at each other. They could guess who he was going to meet. All they could do was send him a look of blessing. All right, send some people to the small divine lands to look for the ruins of the Dark God Palace. If you find it, let me know. Don't go in rashly. Other than me, everyone who goes and will go crazy. My natal divine right weapon is still there. The Golden Princess nodded. She said a few words to the others and left the hall together. There were always things that couldn't be finished. They had to arrange some important matters. Yin Nuoxing watched them leave the hall. He sighed and walked to Xian and the others. He said, I'm going out for a while. Hey, don't be rash. I'm just going out for a while. I'll be back in half a day. You guys should prepare to go to the small divine lands. Xian stood up and looked at him. She asked softly, Don't you need us to go? Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. It's just for a while. It won't be too. Ming Ming walked directly behind him and tugged on his clothes with one hand to show his determination. It won't be too long. All right. I'm going to see Azurite. I'm going to get beaten up. If you want to come, just come. It won't take too much time. Yin Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chu Yingzhan heard him and couldn't help but mutter, bringing his current girlfriend to see his old lover. He's really a fool. The veins on his forehead were about to explode. However, he could only pretend that he didn't hear it. After chatting for a while, Little Qing brought Little Purple Soul back to Yin Nuoxing's soul space. Xian, Feng Bing and Ming were all bound to his soul space. They wouldn't be left behind unless something happened. He thought that the 5 of them would be enough. However, when he turned around, he saw Qin Yin standing quietly behind him. He was startled. After thinking for a while, he decided that it wouldn't be a big deal to bring them along. They would just wait outside. You also wanted to join the fun. However, Yin Nuoxing cast a glance at Little Moon. The latter understood his intention and suppressed the crazy fairy who was jumping up and down. She pulled Little Moon aside and started nagging about her ascension to elementary celestial. Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief and smiled bitterly in his heart. He could not let them see the scene of him being pressed to the ground and beaten up violently by Lu Li. It was not a big deal for him to go there and say that he brought a bramble and asked for punishment. If he did not do it well, The 18 great tribulations of reincarnation would be plastered on his face with the beat of a battle song. He was going there to die anyway. It felt good to be sealed for a while. If he kept being sealed, he would feel good. At dawn the next day, Yin Nuashing woke up from his light dream state and teleported Xian and the others to the ghost forest of the Taiyuan domain. This time, they visited directly from the main gate, instead of going through the back door, through the pavilion. The black forest that appeared in their sight made them sigh with emotion. After coming and going, they came to the ghost forest again. They didn't know if they should feel that it was fate or something else. Although it wasn't to the point where it was infamous, it was still a forbidden place for life. However, they walked around it like it was their backyard. The ghost forest was divided into 3 areas from the periphery to the center. From the outside, the Death Mountain Range looked like a black mountain range. In fact, it was a group of mountains that looked like a group of dragons entwined around them. It was also known as the 1,000 Dragon Mountains. Until today, no one knew what the innermost area was like. However, countless people who were not afraid of death had tried to crash into it, but they didn't even leave a speck of dust behind. They crashed into a barrier at the peak of the divine realm. It was a miracle that they didn't die. He threw some self-defense items to Xian and the others. After giving them a few words of advice, he was still worried. Patiently, he began to explain the details. Xian couldn't help but ask, "Why do you sound like you're making arrangements before your death?" Yin Nuashing, about that. He repeatedly emphasized that he shouldn't run around before he came out. After confirming that the girls understood, Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and turned to walk toward the Black Mountain Range. His lonely figure exuded a bleak aura of autumn. Against the orange light of the morning sun, he looked like a warrior who would never return. He was probably the only person in the entire void who could bring out the tragic atmosphere of an old friend who had not seen him for dozens of years. Xian and the others who stayed behind were puzzled. Yin Nuashing reached out his hand and touched the barrier in front of him. Water ripples appeared in the air and spread to the surroundings. He took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and pushed the barrier into the forest. Just as he thought, this barrier could kill countless people, but it wouldn't stop him. "Lioli, I'm here to see you." Chapter 11:15. His vision was filled with white fog. Yin Nuashing stood still on the spot, but his body was being pulled forward. He could feel the fog and wind brushing past his face. After a while, a ball of light entered his vision, causing him to narrow his eyes. There was a gentle force that forced him to sit down slowly on the hard stone chair. The feeling of the fog and wind quietly dissipated. He knew that he had entered and was sitting in the pavilion. He could not help but take a deep breath and slowly open his eyes. The bright pink dress was the dress that he had praised her for looking like a fairy back then. In fact, there was nothing special about it. It was very plain. Her colorful eyes were as if they were made of glass. They were very beautiful. Her beautiful face revealed an indifferent and ethereal aura. Even when she saw him enter, she did not have any special reaction. However, Yin Nuashing, who knew her very well, at least who knew her from 70 years ago, knew that this girl was very nervous. One of her hands was supporting her cheek, while the other hand, which was hiding under the stone table, must be nervously clutching her dress. It seemed that he was not the only one who was nervous. She was also very nervous. This was a true reunion after 70 years. Both of them fell silent. Time could erase everything and change everything. Some people would become indifferent and forget the past in the near eternal time. But she would not. On the day that the Guardian Array was restored, he saw her in the void and knew that she was still the same as before. He was a little happy, but Yin Nuashing's mouth opened and closed for a while. After a while, he said softly, "Are you okay?" Lu Li's body trembled. She hesitated for 2 to 3 minutes. After 2 to 3 minutes of silence, she nodded slightly. Are you okay?" "I'm okay too," Yin Nuashing said subconsciously. Then, he shook his head with a bitter smile. "Actually, I'm not okay. These years have been pretty good, but after knowing some troublesome things, I don't feel so good anymore." Lu Li nodded slightly and did not say anything. Her bright eyes subconsciously looked at other places, but she could not help but look at him. Yin Nuoxing kept staring at her without looking away. He had already made all the preparations. Whether it was her scolding or her cursing, even if she wanted to vent, he would not resist at all. But he had always been firm in his heart. He did not do anything wrong in the past 70 years. Even if time really went back to that day, he would seal them again, or even forcibly suppress Guang Yadu and Old Shan. He would do the rest by himself. Just like a person who came to the world alone and disappeared alone, no one would die in vain because of him. Bang! Luli slammed the table and stood. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she clenched her teeth, her trembling eyes, and stared at Yin Nuoxing. He could feel the trembling in her heart. Brother, you. Yin Nuoxing stood up and walked over. He hesitated for a few seconds, but still hugged her into his arms. He sighed deeply in his heart. It was really helpless. After 70 years, he still heard her call him that. He felt a little heartache. His colorful eyes inadvertently looked at this pavilion. The small pavilion was 4 meters square. There were many marks on every red pillar. On the ground and the stone table, there were records of her talking to herself. There was also a simple carving of a person's name. She had waited here alone for 70 years, waiting for that heartless guy. Luli clenched her teeth and did not let herself cry. She would not cry. She really thought that she would not cry. All the parting and reunions in the world were allowed. After being together for a long time, they would part, and after being apart for a long time, they would come back together. She knew that he would definitely come back. She had waited for a long time for this. She had made countless mental preparations for this. She had engraved the arrival of this day in her heart countless times. She had murmured his name countless times in her dreams countless times. Countless times in a daze at the world without him countless times. She had thought about it countless times. How could she cry? It did not exist. But why did it feel like a bottle of mixed feelings had been knocked over in her heart? All the emotions that surged in her heart tore apart the fragile fortress that she had built. She clenched her teeth and held back her tears. 70 eras. 70 trillion years. It turned out that she was not as strong as she had imagined. She was no longer as strong as 70 eras. She should have pushed him away and scolded him fiercely. She should have scolded him for being a busybody for 70 eras, and then comforted him or be comforted by him. In the end, everything was messed up. As expected, reality was incomparably nonsensical. Those who always said that they would not cry tears of joy probably did not put their lives and all their emotions into it at all. That was why they could not cry. They mocked others, but they did not know that they were just a pitiful person. Why should she care so much? She still liked to let her imagination run wild. She would cry when she should cry and laugh when she should laugh. All the processes that had passed and the reality that she had been waiting for had arrived at this moment. The action that she had received in exchange for that call had revived her heart that had stopped beating for 70 years. The restless heartbeat in her body made her unable to hold back her tears. This was the only way. This was the most willful choice. She could not ask for more. She used all her strength to respond to his embrace. She wanted to merge with him and never be separated again. She wanted to tell him that 70 years of waiting was too long and too painful. She had waited for half of the Yuan realm's journey. At this moment, hearing his heartbeat seemed to be enough. She comforted herself. This was enough. There was no better result than this. She did not dare to ask for more. She was afraid that all of this was just a fleeting dream. She did not want dreams. She had been dreaming for countless years. At this moment, she only wanted to embrace the purest reality. Feeling the soft and delicate body in his embrace trembling slightly, Yin Nuoxing raised his head and heaved a long sigh. He could not stop sighing in his heart. He had been sighing for a few minutes. 70 years, 70 eras. To him, it was just a fleeting moment in a dream. He did not have the memories of millions of reincarnations. It seemed like only a short while had passed since he woke up. However, the time in the Book of Eras told him that 70 eras had already passed in the world. The Yuan realm had changed countless times. He had missed many exciting events and died many times. Everyone was busy. Others were busy with their own things while he was busy dying. Gently wiping away Lu Li's tears, Yin Nuoxing sighed again. He did not say anything. He only gently wiped away her tears, hoping to soothe the thousands of sadness in her heart. However, he was only thinking about it. The concept of 70 eras, half of the Yuan realm's journey, almost 2 mythological eras, it was really hard on this girl. He had also imagined the scene of their real reunion countless times. However, he did not expect it to be like this. Yin Nuoxing hugged Lu Li and sat down on a bench in the pavilion. His palm kept stroking her long hair. He had a lot to say, but none of it was important. Nothing was important. He should not say it. Let the time pass by like this. It did not matter, even if tomorrow was the time of nirvana. He owed this girl. He owed her 70 years. Lu Li shook her head with red eyes and flung his hand away. Yin Nuoxing lowered his head and looked at her. He saw her suddenly reveal a smile that was uglier than crying. Her jade-like hand gently punched his chest. It was just enough to make his chest hurt. He could not help but draw in a cold breath. Why did you hit me? So what if I hit you? Lu Li grimaced and suddenly threw herself into his arms again. Her tears flowed, making him feel pity and helpless. His clothes were wet, his chest still hurt a little, and his ribs were throbbing with pain. He didn't know if this girl was careful when she did it, but considering her strength as a peak heavenly god, he would take it that she had controlled her strength. But peak divine god, Yin Nuoxing's eyes dimmed imperceptibly. This was not the peak of the heavenly god realm. No, he could feel it. He had stood at that realm for so long. Lu Li's aura could not affect him, and she did not hide anything from him. The aura that leaked out from that small body made his blood and soul tremble. That's right. She had indeed controlled it. She was no longer at the peak of the heavenly god realm. Sigh. He did not know if it was a helpless sigh in his heart or from his mouth. Yin Nuoxing pressed his palm on Lu Li's head and stroked her hair. He had mixed feelings in his heart. Lu Li's body trembled slightly. This let him know that he had probably let out a sigh for her to hear. Seeing her raise her head to look at him, he quickly smiled. What's wrong? Lu Li sniffled and wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She leaned in front of him and asked softly, Are you okay? What can happen to me? You just knocked me lightly. I was ready to be kicked in the sun and slowly swim back. If you really had a plan, I would raise my, but I'm not talking about this. Lu Li frowned and interrupted him. Yin Nuoxing's eyes trembled. He lowered his head and looked at her seriously. A pair of colorful eyes that seemed to have merged all the colors in the world looked straight into her eyes. After a while, he grinned. His smile was bright and beautiful. He reached out his hand and scratched her nose. Congratulations, you have entered the realm above divine God. You're no longer a little girl that I can easily suppress. You don't need my protection anymore. My mission is over. His tone was relaxed, as if he had heaved a sigh of relief. However, he still felt a little awkward. He had always carefully protected them, not just Lu Li, but also Ziyin and the others. Yet, one day, he suddenly realized that the people he had carefully protected behind him had become independent and had even walked ahead of him. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional and a little disappointed. However, he felt more gratified because they had never been flower vases. Lu Li stared at him closely. Her eyes flickered and her eyelids drooped slightly. He had given a lot and done a lot of things that no one knew but were very important. The world had been moving forward. In the end, he had lost everything. It was like a joke, like a mockery. It was like the world was mocking him. Look, you have stopped all the disasters from happening, but you can't stop yourself from losing. What a joke. Seeing her staring at him closely and grabbing his clothes tightly, he could not help but shake his head. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead gently. Lu Li, I'm back. Well, welcome back, brother you. The reunion took a long time. When Yin Nuoxing and Elvira met, they chatted for a long time. Lu Li even waited for him attentively for 70 years. It was not a big deal for the time to be extended. However, there was a limit. It was not Yin Nuoxing who interrupted the warm time of their reunion. Instead, it was Lu Li who interrupted it. She took out a black cube and placed it on the stone table. It was a black cube with complicated but exquisite patterns. It looked like a metal on the outside, but when he touched it, he realized that it was crystal. The 6 sides of the black crystal were opaque. Other than the fact that it could reflect light under the sun, it looked just like a cube. This box crystal and cube, what is this cube for? Yin Nuoxing looked at her curiously as she placed the black cube properly. Lu Li's hand trembled. She looked at him in surprise. Brother Yu, have you forgotten? This is the thing that you solemnly handed to me when you sealed me. You also specifically told me not to vent my anger on it, even if I came back and beat you half to death. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He shrank back in fear, but Lu Li pulled him back. She handed the cube to him and shook her head. I don't know what it is. I've studied it for a while, but I didn't find anything. It doesn't look like a product of the realm of the gods, nor does it look like any product of the eightfold realm that I know of. It's still unknown to me. There was one thing that she didn't say, but she couldn't say it out loud. It was very awkward to say it out loud. She was a little crazy because she had waited for more than 20 years. She imagined too much and thought that this was something that Yin Nuoxing left for her. It was just like when the two of them were deciphering the mystery together, but she studied it alone for a few eras. However, nothing happened. This cube was just a stinky and hard metal crystal. Yin Nuoxing rubbed his eyebrows. He took the cube and looked at it for a while. His brows were knitted together. The hidden danger from back then had been verified. He had forgotten part of it, after all. The memory that he retrieved was not complete. He didn't know if Zero had this memory. Even if he had it, he probably couldn't get it back. The guy had gone crazy. Something that could be given to Lu Li must be very important. However, there was really no information left on this cube. He also didn't write a memo for her to tell him what this thing was. Thinking about it, he was a little distressed. Your memory hasn't been completely restored? Lu Li sensed that something was wrong. She frowned and couldn't help but move closer. Are you really okay? Yin Nuoxing spread out his hands. Although I want to say that I'm okay, in fact, there should be something wrong. This is not the first thing that I've forgotten. For a period of time, I specifically searched my memory and found that there were many gaps. For many things, I only remembered the beginning and the end. There was no process. For some things, only the beginning or the end was left. I'm not even sure if I've forgotten something. The Book of Eras can't be used on me. I just kept forgetting. In the end, I don't know what memory I've lost, but the overall memory is probably no more than 20%. He tossed the black cube up and down and wrinkled his nose. Just from the appearance, he couldn't tell what this thing was used for. Was it a mechanical box? Or was it a part of a special device? Or was it an energy body? Was it something more abstract? He tried to use the cube and the pendant to move back and forth. He put a bunch of things together, put them on the pendant, knocked them on the pendant, and even touched it with a Netherworld Ruin sword. In just a few minutes, he had turned the pendant upside down, but he didn't find any reaction from the hard metal crystal. Lu Li was watching him constantly. She looked at him curiously. Compared to watching him play with the pendant in his hand, she paid more attention to his face and kept staring at him. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but grin. He whispered, "Why are you looking at me?" Lu Li blinked. "I'm just looking at you. You've changed a lot. I have to remember it quickly so that you won't disappear again next time." Yin Nuoxing's expression was a little strange. He lowered his head and muttered a few words, but he didn't refute. He was aware of his sudden disappearance. Lu Li and the others were also mentally prepared for his sudden disappearance. Anyway, this guy would disappear when they weren't paying attention, and then he would come back to them when they weren't paying attention. It was a game that made their hearts beat faster. It made them flustered and exasperated, but they couldn't do anything about it. After playing with the cube for a while, Yin Nuoxing sighed and casually threw it on the stone table. He looked at it for a while and then carefully put it away. He shook his head helplessly. "There's nothing I can do. I don't know what this thing is. Even the Book of Epics can't analyze it. Do you need me to help you deal with your memory?" Lu Li tilted her head and rested her head on his shoulder. "No, it's not as simple as an ordinary memory loss. I've been reincarnated so many times. Although I don't have the memories from when I was reincarnated, The actual things that happen will never change. I've been reincarnated for hundreds of billions and trillions of lifetimes. It's such a long journey of reincarnation. Even if I've made all the preparations, I'll still lose something. I'll only have my memories back. I should be glad that I've only lost a small part of my memory. It's not that my soul is damaged, and it's not that I've lost anything. The lost memories can always be found. I'll just put this thing aside for now. Yin Nuoxing sighed. He knew that he had lost a part of his memory. It would be a lie if he said that he did not care. However, it was useless to care about it. There was no way to find what he had lost. The fragments that once existed in his memory were completely unraveled with the full recovery of the divine bloodline. However, they were not useful memory fragments. Many of them were related to cultivation. He had already recovered these 2 times. There is also a part of the chaotic memory fragments that could not be connected at all. Even the deepest and darkest memories were not sealed. Those were all things that he had experienced in the ancient era. With the recovery of his memory, why would he be afraid of that darkness? Luli blinked and felt a little dizzy. You're just throwing it aside to collect dust. You were very serious when you handed it to me. It should be something very important. You just threw it aside like that. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't even remember what it is. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. This thing either has a special use or a special meaning. Oh, since even you, who is above the divine bloodline, can't open it, maybe it's not complete. Maybe it has other uses. Who knows? Luli couldn't help but facepalm. This thing that had kept her in suspense for dozens of eras ended up being thrown aside to collect dust just because the original body came back and said, I forgot. It felt like a family heirloom that had been guarded for generations had been thrown away like trash one day. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and stared at her with great interest. He smiled and said, Let's not talk about that first. Let's talk about you. How did you connect the broken path? How did you walk on that path? Could it be that you also walked on it by accident? Luli sighed in her heart. Just as she was about to answer, she heard his last sentence. She couldn't help but be stunned. How did you know? Holy shit, it can't be. Luli nodded helplessly. I did cross it by accident. But how'd I cross it? I'm sorry, brother you. I also want to tell you, but I really don't know how I broke through. I want to deduce the moment I broke through, but I can't do it. The memory of the month before and after I broke through is rather blurry. Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. He had also received the same answer from that old ghost. The process of breaking through was impossible to investigate. He had fallen asleep and had already broken through when he woke up. As for Luli, she had directly lost her memory of that period of time. It wasn't completely accurate to say that she had lost it. Her memory had become very blurry. When he connected the 2 together, he couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 11:16. Yin Nuoxing always liked to let his imagination run wild. He thought about the depths and the ends. Some of his thoughts could help him, but some of them would make him go into a dead end, and he could not stop at all. In the ancient times, when he was alive, it was still unknown whether there was an existence above the divine realm. The mystery of the broken road had existed long before he reached the peak of the divine realm. He did not understand it at the beginning of the 70th era, so he left a question in the 9 Milky Way. What was at the end of existence? At that time, he foolishly thought that the end was after the enlightened mastery, until Old Ghost told him that there was a road beyond the enlightened mastery. So no one could answer that question, not even those above the enlightened mastery. In the ancient times, he was still confused about the broken road of the enlightened mastery. He did not know about the saying in the realm after the enlightened mastery, but he knew that there must be something after the enlightened mastery. So he assumed that there was a road beyond the enlightened mastery, and he acquiesced. It was not until this life that he completely confirmed the existence of the realm above the enlightened mastery and the realm beyond it. He had questions, not just one, but also many enlightened mastery. Did the broken road exist? How did one cross it? What would happen if one crossed it? Yin Nuoxing thought that he would get an answer in this life. After knowing Old Ghost and knowing that Luli had stepped into the realm above the divine realm, he was disappointed, but he was also happy. The latter was more important. Then, when he asked the two of them how they had broken through, they both fell asleep. This made him feel that his worldview had collapsed into pieces. Seeing his pale face, Luli quickly pinched him and said, "Brother, you." "I." Yin Nuashing waved his hand and sighed, "It's nothing." "Oh, I'll be fine after I calm down. Let's not talk about this first. Are you sure you're okay?" Luli was stunned for a moment and shook her head. "I'm fine. There are no sequelae, and I have indeed embarked on this road." As for the process, she looked a little embarrassed. In fact, when she broke through, she was also stunned for a while. Then, she became excited. She also wanted to show off in front of him, like a child showing off that she had done something that others could not do, but when she tried to recall, her memory was foggy. She did not know how she did it at all. Yin Nuashing looked a little dignified. Although he was happy, he was also a little doubtful. He knew two people who were above the enlightened mastery, but neither of them remembered how they walked on the broken road. This made him vigilant. It was not that he was jealous, but he was suspicious. Why did the two people who broke through happen to be asleep? And why couldn't they find a memory of their breakthrough at all? They couldn't even deduce the process by themselves. This might be a problem with some rules of the Great Yuan world and the Eight Elements world, which originated from the conceptual level of rules. Or someone secretly pushed them and blurred their memory of the previous month. Between the two conjectures, he was more inclined to the former answer. There were too many things about the latter answer that did not make sense. He could not understand the benefits of doing such a thing at all. As the saying goes, it is better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. Randomly enlightening people like this would only make people confused and vigilant. To be honest, if he were to do this, he could even raise a religion of faith. Those enlightened mastery had all lost their hair because of this broken road. Even if they were to be asked to believe in someone, there would be a lot of people fighting to be the first. Luli did not know a lot of thoughts flashed through Yin Nuashing's mind. He kept staring at the girl when he was thinking nonsense, which made her hair stand on end. She could not help but poke his chest. "What are you looking at? It's creepy." Yin Nuashing came back to himself. He waved his hand with a hollow smile. "I'm thinking about the origin of the Great Yuan world." "You're thinking nonsense again." Luli looked at him and muttered. She was about to change the topic when she suddenly thought of something. "Speaking of origin, do you know what is called above the enlightened mastery? The name of that realm?" "I don't know. If that realm really has a name, it was probably named in the mythological era." Luli nodded and smiled slightly. "The realm above the enlightened mastery is called Origin Deity." Hearing this, Yin Nuashing nodded thoughtfully. He wanted to find some useful clues from this name, but after thinking for a while, he gave up. It was just a name. Even if it really contained some information, it was not something that he could understand by thinking nonsense like this. He was not surprised that Luli knew this name. That old ghost did not know the name Origin Deity. Luli knew some things about the mythological era, but only a very small part. In the ancient times, they had also deduced the broken road of the enlightened mastery. At that time, there were many enlightened mastery masters, and there were also many masters at the peak of the enlightened mastery. Many people made countless attempts to take that step. Among them, the Shun musicians were the most tragic. They risked their lives to step on that broken road, and then suddenly died, leaving behind a bunch of sparks. Other than the first time, there were many situations, but no one knew, and everyone had their own means. Among them, he and Luli came up with a very evil idea. They believed that the inability to step on and touch that broken road might be due to the rules of heaven and earth of that era. That is, the rules of the primordial realm. In the situation where Luli had not yet stepped on the enlightened mastery, and Yin Nuashing was already at the peak of the enlightened mastery, they spent hundreds of thousands of years preparing. They extracted a wisp of the former soul and made it into a phantom puppet. As its name suggested, it was just a puppet. Then, they used the power of the Netherworld Ruins sword to forcibly penetrate the sea of time and sent the puppet back to the mythological era. This was actually very risky, but in terms of rules, it should work. There would not be the same two gods in the same timeline. That is, the gods could not see the appearance of their past gods, but only sent back a puppet that had no intelligence and no strength of rules. It only had some rules and karma, just like the reflection of his soul, which was a loophole in the rules. There was only one order they made, and that was to let the phantom puppet return to the mythological era, cultivate to become an enlightened mastery, and bring part of the rules of the mythological era back to the ancient era. Moreover, it was to return to the ancient era on the timeline, which meant that the puppet had to wait for a long time, waiting for the timeline to connect. The powerful rules and karma of the enlightened mastery would cause reality to collapse to only one result, and that was no matter what paradoxes occurred in the middle, only Lu Li and her phantom puppet existed. However, the risks were also obvious. First of all, dozens of eras had passed, and the most powerful mythological era and the most terrible dark era, and it had been bombarded twice by the great samsara. Even the realm of the gods might not be able to preserve such an inconspicuous puppet, and in fact, the puppet had really escaped and survived until the ancient era. As for whether anything had happened in the middle, it was unknown. Anyway, now that Lu Li and her phantom puppet had merged, this was also an unshakable fact. As for whether this method would work, neither of them could say for sure. When they retrieved the phantom puppet, it was already very broken, but it was indeed preserved. After Lu Li merged with it, there was an additional fragment of the rules of the mythological era in her soul, as well as a little bit of memory, but it was useless after they retrieved it. They even waited patiently for an era to prove that the realm above the enlightened mastery had nothing to do with the rules of the mythological era. Well, it could not be said that it had nothing to do with the rules of the mythological era. After all, she only had a little fragment of the rules of the mythological era, and it could not prove anything. However, it was just a fragment of the rules of the mythological era that Yin Nuoxing and the others had paid a lot, and in the end, they failed. However, the extra memory of the mythological era was an unexpected product, and there was nothing more. When I broke through, it was in ancient times. To be specific, it was at the end of the 88th era. I have been in the realm of enlightened mastery for 22 eras. Wow, an era has unknowingly passed. When Lu Li said this number, she was also very surprised. Anyway, I feel that it has nothing to do with our plan back then. The fragments of the rules of the mythological era look very powerful, but it is useless. I can't use that part of the power. I can't use it. It is like a stone in a latrine, smelly and hard and useless. I didn't hear you say that back then. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched fiercely. The thing that he had spent so much effort to get was called a smelly stone in the latrine pit. He really didn't know what to say. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. Lu Li spread out her hands. After reaching the level of the Empyrean God of Origin, I am slightly less suppressed by these rules. Now, this era is still in the period where the rules are withering, but I'm only affected by 70%, at least I can still cultivate. Is the Empyrean God of Origin about to break free from the shackles of the primordial realm's rules? Yin Nuoxing sighed and looked at her enviously. That's great, I want it too. Sigh. It's a pity that I can only think about it. I have to do it over and over again. No one in this world is as miserable as me. Lu Li was just about to comfort him, but when she heard that, she could not help but smile bitterly. After thinking for a while, she patted him on the shoulder and smiled. It's okay. I will protect you from now on. Ha ha ha. Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly with 3 words, and it sounded like he had given up on himself. Lu Li shook her head. She knew that he would not give up on himself, but seeing that she had wasted so much time, she was still a little disappointed. She could only think of a way to change the topic so that he would forget about it. Have you found the materials I asked you to find for me? Oh, I have found them all. Yin Nuoxing nodded and took out a blue crystal and put it in her hand. You can count it. After all, I did not collect it myself. But the people I asked are quite reliable, so there should not be any problems. Are you planning to forge a divine weapon? Lu Li held the crystal lightly. Her soul power went into it and circled around it. After a while, she came back out and nodded in satisfaction. Then she smiled. Yes, didn't I say it before? I want to break into the divine weapon ranking. Hearing that, Yin Nuashing said in a low voice, "The last divine weapon on the divine weapon ranking, which is the 48th divine weapon, is called the God Destroyer Hammer. Its power is comparable to a divine weapon of the divine level. Its growth and spirituality are also quite impressive. Are you ready? Don't worry. How can I not be able to do it? Brother, you is the one. Don't forget that I am now stronger than you." Luli proudly raised her chest and smiled confidently. Hearing that, Yin Nuashing could not help but laugh. He was used to treating her as the little girl in the past. Yes, unknowingly, she was already stronger than him. Naturally, she would be able to forge an extremely powerful divine weapon. However, the corners of his eyes were a little wet, probably because some sand got in. Can it be compared to the 12 divine weapons of the divine sword record? Yin Nuashing teased. Hearing that, Luli smiled bitterly and waved her hand. It can't be compared. The 12 divine weapons of the divine sword record are all monsters. At my current level, I can see that the divine sword record is probably created by a monster that is one level higher than me. What is above the divine origin? Luli shook her head. I don't know. The little fragment of the mythological era did not have such records. After that, she suddenly smiled. Does the little girl in your soul not know? Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment. After thinking about it, he felt that it was normal for her to see everything in his soul. Then, he calmed down and shook his head. Xiner is indeed someone from the mythological era. However, she does not know that much. She was just a little girl back then. Luli looked at him with a faint smile. Suddenly, she reached out and pinched the back of his waist. I always find some strange little girls. Yin Nuashing sucked in a cold breath and shook his head with a bitter smile. It's all an accident. An accident? Oh, an accident? I have been watching you, brother you. Ever since you stepped into the Gathering Yuan Pavilion in Yuyan City, I have been watching you. Luli smacked her lips. When you ran to the Divine Land, I even found that little girl for you. So, it was you who took the little purple soul away. Yin Nuashing's expression was a little strange. What? That little girl ran to the corner of the Ganyuan region. I was the one who picked her up and brought her to the underground palace. Are you the observer, or am I the observer? I took over the observer's duty when brother you is not on duty. I have been watching you. Damn, you little girl haven't been spying on me all this time. Yin Nuashing had goosebumps all over his body. Who is spying on you? Watching you flirt with the beauties beside you? Luli said with some hidden bitterness. She pinched his back again with her jade-like hand. Who has the time to look at you all the time? Seeing you and those girls being so lovey-dovey, I'm about to die of jealousy. Yin Nuashing was speechless. Ah, this little girl admitted it. 70 years ago, she stubbornly refused to admit it. Even little girl Guang and the others said that she was too pretentious. He did not expect her to admit it now. You have recovered your memory, but you didn't come over. You have been ignoring me for almost a year. I will remember this until the end of time. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment, then held his breath and planned to make a comeback. Someone didn't even dare to say half a word in the primordial era. Luli rolled her eyes at him. What can I do even if I say it? I finally made up my mind. In the end, those two little girls took advantage of the loophole in the chain of your heart before you woke up and sealed it. What can I do? Yin Nuashing was completely speechless. This little girl was so blunt. Her words were full of resentment. Just the resentment alone could choke him to death. I sat on the Dragon Head Peak for 70 years. I didn't do much in these 70 years. I only use it to make up my mind. However, I dare to say it openly. I dare to tell you everything. I didn't even think about what I would do if there was no response at all. Because I know you, I know how you would respond to me. I've said it now. Luli sighed. She did not go anywhere for 70 years. In the beginning, she was not very determined. She lived day by day and second in a daze. Being absent-minded for a long time caused her to go a little crazy. It took her a long time to adjust her mentality. After she woke up, she kept thinking about these things. She did not dare to stop thinking. She was worried that she would go crazy again. She needed to think to relieve her tension. She also needed to come up with an answer on her own. Yin Nuashing leaned back slightly. He did not say anything. He just looked at her quietly. His colorful eyes were exceptionally bright. There was a flash of panic in his eyes. He never thought that this little girl would dare to say everything out loud. And the question was, what should he do? He was so surprised that he almost had a heart attack. F***CK, an answer that he squeezed out after 70 years. No matter how he thought about it, it did not sound good. Yes, you have already answered me. Luli suddenly smiled sweetly. Yinuashing was dumbfounded. He did not say anything. He was so anxious that his face was covered in sweat. How could he give an answer? I've said it. I know how you'll answer me. I can get the answer from your expression, breath, and look. Brother, you still care about me very much. Luli said with a grin. Nonsense. There are only a few people I care about in this world. How can I not care? How can I not care about you? But this and that. That. Before he finished, Luli covered his mouth and shook her head at him. This answer is enough, brother you. Billions of years, countless years. With you by my side, I feel that those 70 years were worth it. This is enough. This is really a cheap wish, Luli. Yinuashing rubbed his long hair and looked at Luli. He thought that he would be more panicked. For example, he would be at a loss of what to do. Perhaps he had been prepared since the ancient age. He was calmer than he thought. Although he was still a little panicked, it was not to the extent that he lost his mind. Just like what he said to Xian and the others, he also reminded them that in the ancient age, when the chain of heart was still intact, he was more resolute than he was now. However, he still had them by his side. It could only be said that fate made fools of people. In the end, he did not chase them away. Just like this year after year, he finally became like this. This is enough, brother you. This is enough. Luli whispered softly. Her glass-like eyes flowed with a little joy and joy. I am not greedy. Moreover, if I ask for more, you will be very troubled, right? A little. After all, I can't do anything to you. Yinuashing sighed. I have always said that I am not a very good partner. I am not even suitable for this identity. But you are all more stubborn than I am. Do you want me to draw a knife and chase you away? You are so soft-hearted. If you really hardened your heart and did not hesitate to turn hostile and chase us away, you might succeed. Don't say that. When my weapon is pointed behind me, this world should be done for. Hee. That is why brother you is always soft-hearted. Otherwise, how could they and we have an opportunity to take advantage of? Chapter 11:17. They talked a lot and talked about the original purpose of Yin Nual planet coming here. In the end, they talked about the past for a long time. It was not that it was bad or bad, but it was purely because the two of them were so indecent that they were practically a match made in heaven. They could talk about another topic in a few sentences and then jump to another topic after a few sentences. In the middle, they could still maintain their words and thoughts without interrupting. In the end, they could still talk about the original topic. Then they would talk about this and that and go astray again. It would be hard to believe that there was not a tacit understanding of billions of years in between. After finally saying everything in his heart, Yinuashing raised his head and looked at the sky. It was noon. Luli stood up and stretched. Holding his hand, she smiled and said, Then let's do it. Even if you don't want to see it, I will tie you up and take you there. Yinuashing did not know whether to laugh or cry. Just as he nodded, he felt that the world was spinning. A moment ago, the sun was still shining in the sky, but suddenly the surroundings dimmed. They appeared in a starry sky. In a dim, starry sky, the starlight scattered here from an extremely distant place. This was the suburb of a starry sky, a deep space that was close to being extinguished. There were few stars, only a few starry dust, and nebulae scattered unevenly in the star region. There was a strange ring-shaped device in front of them. It looked very simple. It was a huge iron ring, and its surface was engraved with the same huge runes and exquisite patterns. If it was a bracelet, the wrist of the wearer would have to be at least 100 million miles wide to wear this ring. There were 6 of the same metal rune rings. 3 of them were horizontally encircling the outer ring, and 3 of them were vertically encircling the inner ring. From the inner ring to the outer ring, each ring gradually shrank. They were located in the same center and were also encircling the outer ring. On each ring, there was a huge circular hole as thick as the ring at a certain distance. Those circular holes went straight through each metal ring and pointed to the center of the circle. In the core area of this strange structure, there was a cloud of fog, a cloud of starry sky fog. It was colorful and did not look like ordinary starry dust. It contained a huge and indescribable energy. It was most likely man-made. Yin Nuashing did not understand what the circle and the device on it were used for, but he had been with Navila for a long time, so he had some knowledge about it. Although this thing was definitely very different from the one he created, he could confirm after looking at it for a while that it was a device used to focus energy. Perhaps every huge circular hole was an energy source input point. When he thought of this, he thought of a deeper meaning. This was most likely used by Liuli to create that celestial weapon. He had also created a celestial weapon before. He had worked together with Guang and the others to create a world-type celestial weapon. He did not use these tools, but did not prevent others from using it, right? Welcome to my celestial forge. Azurite proudly puffed out her chest and said something that Yin Nuashing expected. But even so, he could not help but let out a pfft. He had dabbled in all sub-professions and had forged his own weapons. The Godhead weapons, and divine power weapons that he had were all forged by himself, but they were produced in different ways. The only thing he had never tried was using such a large forge. Yin Nuashing wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, "Is there a need to use such a large forge?" "Of course there's a need. This is my best work. Everything has to be the best, even if it is just melting scraps." Azurite nodded, as if it was a matter of course. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her hand, and a huge starry sky array appeared from the surroundings, surrounding this huge starry sky forged from all directions. Every inch of the huge array seemed to be cast by a starry sky, flowing with light and color, extremely gorgeous and mysterious. Seeing this, Yin Nuashing broke out in a cold sweat. Damn it, this array was made by him. Celestial Rainbow Array. Hee, it's all thanks to Brother Yu. I couldn't have made such an exquisite array myself. Azurite smiled. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. Can your brain really make a divine weapon? You'll be confused if you take more than 20 steps. You'll die on the spot if you take more than 3 digits. You'll explode if you combine the two. Can you really afford it? It's true that your soul is very powerful, but you don't have to be so reckless. Tell me how many kilograms of scraps you need to refine, what you need to carve on every inch, and how many runes you need to inlay into the complementary materials. There are 60 celestial rainbow arrays here. The amount of star power you need to seize is... No, don't read it. I don't want to hear it. Azurite broke down instantly. Seeing her breaking down and covering her ears, Yin Nuashing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know if this celestial forge that looked very glamorous and actually seemed very powerful had been used before. If it was used by this idiot, wouldn't it explode? Shouldn't he hide a little further away? After Azurite finished howling, she glared at him fiercely. Seeing the emotions in his eyes, she couldn't help but mutter, "Brother Yu, don't worry. For today, I've already exploded. No, practiced countless times. There won't be any danger. You just need to wait for me at the side." Yin Nuashing's eyes twitched. He felt like he heard something dangerous. "You just want to say explode." Hiss. Luli pinched his waist hard and said, "You misheard." Yin Nuashing sucked in a cold breath and shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Do whatever you want. If I'm not wrong, the things I've collected are actually scraps, right? Although they are very precious, and some of them are even some unique treasures in the world, they definitely don't need this huge project. They should have other uses or meanings." Azurite giggled. "As expected of Brother Yu. You're absolutely right. Those are just some base materials, but they are all condensation of rules that symbolize or represent a world. Why need are their rules and the bits of spirituality of that world that they contain? You want to use the condensation of rules of thousands of worlds as the core. Yin Nuashing raised his eyebrows. That's right. Then what's the main material? Azurite pursed her lips and waved her right hand. Clusters of light the size of a fist emerged from the space. There were about 20 to 30 of them. When Yin Nuashing saw clearly what was inside, his face turned pale. What the F asterisk CK? Those were 20 to 30 clusters of light. In other words, Azurite intended to use worlds as the main material and the condensation of rules of thousands of worlds as the core to forge a divine weapon. If this thing could be made, it would probably break countless rules. After all, the heavenly gods like to exploit loopholes in the rules. This time would not make a difference. He was just shocked. He had thought of many things, and a lot of ideas flashed through his mind in 1 second. But he did not expect that the main material would be this at all. It was really unexpected and beyond imagination. These are all clusters of light. I carefully selected them. Azurite waved her hand, and the 20 to 30 clusters of light touched each other lightly and bounced off each other like balls. They don't look different on the surface, but they are completely different inside. I chose worlds that were heading toward destruction or worlds that had just been born and had not yet formed. I fixed them at that moment, the moment of destruction and rebirth. There were also worlds that I carefully created and filled them with various kinds of energy. In the end, they became the materials you see. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched uncontrollably. What the F asterisk CK? How exaggerated is this? Since ancient times, not many people have such courage. No, this was not a matter of courage. This was a matter of imagination. Who would think of using the entire clusters of light as materials to melt them? Even a normal person would not think of this. Even a lunatic like him would not think of such an exaggerated thing. He did not expect that this achievement would fall on Azurite's head. Why don't you lend me the Linghong sword? Azurite whispered. What the F asterisk CK? What if you blow it up? This is the second most powerful divine weapon. You are willing to blow it up. Hiss. You are really willing to bite it. Azurite bit his shoulder fiercely and licked her saliva. She snorted and threw his head away. Who told you to talk nonsense? You also said that the Linghong sword is the second most powerful divine weapon. How can I use it for bad purposes? I'm just using it as a backup to stabilize the situation. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. She thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. Actually, what I want to say is that the creation of the 48 divine weapons on the divine weapon ranking list does not require the assistance of any other divine weapons. Although I don't care about this, you actually want to surpass them, at least surpass most of them, right? Azurite lowered her head and muttered. She raised her head and said, "All right, I know. I won't use it. I will think of a way myself. Actually, it is not a big problem. I am mainly worried that the control of the energy during the creation process is too great. It will cause the space to collapse and the energy will be broken, which will affect the result. Don't worry. The neon array that I created back then has the function of stabilizing the space. You just need to use a little bit of your mind to control it." Yin Nuashing said. She tilted her head and looked at the huge magic formation that looked like a fragment of space. The neon array was originally used to condense the power of an entire star. I didn't expect that you would use it to create a divine weapon. No, wait a minute. Ring, circle, whole neon array. Wow, you are not thinking of, that's the one. Azurite gave her a thumbs up and grinned. Yin Nuashing's face changed in an instant. Before she could say anything, she waved her hand and an unimaginable amount of energy suddenly gathered in this part of space. The colorful clouds that were wrapped in 3 layers of metal rings gradually emitted a bright light. Space and time collapsed towards the center from all directions. It was as if a black hole had been created, violently devouring everything, especially the free energy. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 6 rings slowly opened up a little. The extremely huge patterns and lines on the surface released a bright light. The neon array slowly rotated at this moment. The dim and empty space suddenly lit up with dense spots of light. Yin Nuashing saw those spots of light. It was as if the sky that was covered by dark clouds had suddenly cleared up. Little bits of bright starlight suddenly descended. That was the enormous power of the stars that had crossed the starry sky and rushed here. The endless power of the stars madly rushed into the neon array. Then it exploded along the center of the magic formation in a few holes, converging into a huge energy torrent that could illuminate the entire star region. The energy that carried the power of the stars of the entire star region passed through the holes in the rings and was branded by the patterns on the metal rings. Then, the huge energy torrent crashed into the cloud of incomparably bright starry dust. The huge amount of energy disturbed the dust cloud. It began to surge and gradually solidify. The almost infinite energy instantly rushed to the center of the cloud. Then, the energy began to condense and crazily compress. The torrent of star energy from all directions condensed into hundreds of streams and rushed into the starry dust. The condensed starlight was blazing to an extreme temperature, but it did not seem hot in this place. The runes and charms isolated the super powerful energy that could melt the earth and the starry sky. The center where the endless energy gathered became brighter and brighter, as if a star was being born. Go! When the light there became intense for a moment, Luli shouted softly and waved his hand to throw in thousands and tens of thousands of materials. Among them were the unique treasures that he asked Ning, Qianxue, and the Golden Princess to bring from the Book of Myriad Realms. Those extremely precious items only lasted for less than 10 seconds in the starry sky power pulled by the neon array. They instantly melted and disappeared from the observable world. The remaining rules flowed like water and gathered at the center of the dust cloud along with the tens of thousands of troops. Yin Nuoxing did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that there seemed to be more than 20 light clusters mixed in with the galaxy that Lu Li threw out just now. Wow. He threw in the materials together. Yin Nuoxing was silent. This guy recklessly used such a large piece of equipment to refine a divine weapon. Was he planning to perish together with him? But it's not a big problem. That's all. It's the same whether it's early or late. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 round. Then, those metal rings came to a rigid halt with a rumble. They slowly rotated in another direction, and the heavy weight caused even the starry sky to tremble. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. Boom! Muffled thunder came from the deep space of the star sector, causing Yin Nuoxing's expression to change slightly. He turned his head to look at the depths of the stars in the distance. It was an exceptionally brilliant scene. All the light in this starry sky was converging here. That was the power of trillions, tens of trillions, or even more stars converging here. His colorful eyes emitted a bright light as he looked at the deep space in the distance. The stars were shining so brightly that they were almost brighter than the moment of creation. The entire starry sky became scorching hot, and his eyes could capture the light. He saw countless rays of light forming an ocean of light that streaked across the endless starry sky and passed by him. Then, they entered the rings along the neon rainbow array. At a certain moment, his expression suddenly changed. He casually waved his hand in front of him and actually caught a solid object. He opened his hand, and lying in his palm was a 1-foot-long fragment. It was a fragment of the star sector that fell from the starry sky like broken glass, bringing with it a vast galaxy. With the world as the raw material, the world naturally needs to be ignited and burn everything. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment and let go of his hand. The fragment of the star sector rushed into the center of the array and fused into the scorching and brilliant light. In the fragment, in the light ball, he felt an endless amount of energy from the origin. It even contained the power of the world and the power of the primordial realm. The condensed energy had already torn the space into pieces. Perhaps in the entire starry sky, only the space in front of him was still stable. The other places had already become a mess. The scorching dust cloud had already disappeared. Now, the light of the entire starry sky had gathered there. Strange phenomena burst out from it, and there was constantly monstrous energy bursting. A bolt of energy that had condensed into a solid object streaked across tens of thousands of miles and turned into a solid, colorful fragment that shattered. The enormous energy and pressure compressed it back into the light ball. The scorching light ball was extremely dazzling, and the scorching energy arc shot out for billions of miles. They seemed to be standing on a star's crown, and in front of them was a superstar that was about to explode. Its light was so bright that it could be seen by the entire starry sky. It had even surpassed the object of a star. Yun Nuashing felt that he was watching the moment of creation, but the scene in front of him was countless times more brilliant than the flash of creation. Boom! Originally, no sound could be made in the starry sky, but he could feel that a terrifying thing was brewing in the scorching light ball. There were several extremely terrifying energy flashes that almost caused this irritable thing to explode. That was the phenomenon of more than 20 world light balls being melted. More than 20 worlds were forcefully stuffed into the light ball, causing it to become extremely irritable. This world had also become chaotic. The capacity of this world had exceeded its limit, and it would even disintegrate from the inside out. Under the control of Azure, the 6 metal rings slowly and orderly split into countless parts. The irritable light ball in the center seemed to be giving birth to a star. Yun Nuashing could see a sphere that distorted reality and the conceptual layer of the rules there. His eyes looked at the center and felt that it was burning. Countless mottled and magical energy phenomena were transforming into a solid form, and then disintegrating in an instant. He even felt that this world was collapsing towards that center. As the metal rings separated, the irritable light ball was also expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. It continued to expand as the rings continued to disperse outwards. Its volume had expanded by several times in just a dozen seconds. Yun Nuashing felt that space and time had solidified into a solid form, transformed into a tangible form by the highly compressed energy. "Let's step back," Luli whispered and pulled Yun Nuashing back. His line of sight had never left the light and the starry sky. Now, he did not need to open the eye of the ocean to see the gathering of trillions of starlight. Countless rays of light shone on the spherical area in front of him, condensing into a new sun. The two of them quickly retreated and flew a long distance. When they passed a boundary point, Yun Nuashing felt that his body was slightly empty. The countless scorching rays of light that filled his body seemed to have disappeared, and the brilliant golden sea of light faded from his eyes. He looked carefully and found that they seemed to have floated out of a star corona. They had been in the core of this sun all this time. After breaking away from the star corona, Yun Nuashing could observe the situation of this starry sky better. It was really unprecedentedly bad. All kinds of origin energy and primordial elements were in a mess. "This is not good." Yun Nuashing pulled Azure's hand and pointed at the chaotic starry sky. "This world is going to be chaotic." Oh, it's normal operation. No problem, no problem." Azure seemed to have recovered a lot of energy and answered more cheerfully. She gave a thumbs up and grinned foolishly. "Brother, you don't worry. No problem." Boom! A large piece of space fragment, the size of an entire galaxy, rumbled and shattered in the distance. The sound directly penetrated their ears, giving the two of them a fright. Then, they saw that the fragment was sucked into the constantly expanding sun by a powerful and nearly limitless force, disappearing without a trace. Yun Nuashing looked at Azure calmly. The latter laughed awkwardly. "Probably you're going to sacrifice this world, right?" Yun Nuashing took a deep breath. I didn't plan to do that at first." Azure was embarrassed and smiled awkwardly. "But if I can't control it, I can't do anything, right? Then I'll add one more. Anyway, the raw materials are the same." Yun Nuashing couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. This guy really hadn't changed, even after 70 years. He acted without any plan and didn't even consider the consequences. The constantly expanding sun was like a balloon, and the star crown was leaking air crazily. Streams of energy that were hundreds of millions of miles wide gushed out, and endless energy surged in. Large pieces of world fragments fell into it, and even a piece of the world barrier of Yunua planet could be seen falling in. At this moment, this world was already riddled with holes, and the power of the void was pouring in from all directions. It was like a sea that covered the sky. The violent purplish-black and black torrents broke into the world light ball and swallowed everything. The void is rushing in, Yin Nuashing reminded. He wasn't worried. With his eyesight, he could see that the blazing sun had formed a powerful law domain and wouldn't be swallowed by the void. Instead, he was worried that the void would be eaten by it. As expected, Azure waved her hand and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry. I'll eat as much as I can." In the next second, Yun Nuashing saw a planet with a radius of 30,000 miles plunge into the light ball and disappear. The energy field there could even tear the world apart. A mere planet wasn't even enough to fill the gap between the teeth. In the end, they couldn't see this anymore. A large sea of light was pressing toward them. Azure sensed what was about to happen in advance. Yun Nuashing was a second or two later, but he also realized something. The former pulled him and disappeared from this part of the starry sky. The moment the two of them disappeared, the endless sea of void tore the world barrier and rushed into the world light ball, drowning everything in the void. Chapter 11:18. In the dark void, a ball of light suddenly flashed. It shook a few times in the void, and then the light gradually dissipated. Two figures emerged from the ball of light. Yin Nuashing saw the dark void. He was at a loss for a moment, and then hurriedly closed his eyes to organize what had just happened. After a while, he came back to himself. He opened his mouth and breathed out a golden energy smoke ring. So exciting, isn't it? Fun, right? Luli grinned. Yin Nuashing knocked her head and rolled his eyes. But how can forging a divine weapon be exciting? Do you think you can create a world-shaking aura just by eating a meal? Luli held her head, feeling wronged. Hearing that, she could not help but look at him and said righteously, "Sister Hua had such an aura when she ate back then." Yin Nuashing, that girl is an exception. Don't try to bluff your way out of this. This trick is useless. How can you make a heavenly weapon and blow up an entire world? Isn't sacrificing more than 20 worlds not enough? Why did you have to blow up the world that you made as well? Anyway, I made it myself. There is no life in it. If it blows up, so be it. Brother, you are so long-winded. Yin Nuashing still wanted to say something, but Luli pressed her hand on his mouth in advance and said with a smile, "All right, it's scary but not dangerous. Everything is under control. After all, the balls of light that I made are for use. I don't intend to nurture life. Let's not talk about this for now. Look." She raised her hand and waved at the empty void. A fist-sized, bright, white spot of light appeared in the void and then flew toward them. That spot of light kept releasing rings of colorful, cloud-like energy. It was like a deep nebula. It was very beautiful, shining, and very eye-catching in the void. Yin Nuashing looked at the colorful spot of light and then looked at Luli. Is this the residue that was left just now? Did the forging fail? No, brother, you are so stupid. Luli shook her head and took the light. Look, the light fell on her palm and wriggled like a ball of soft mud. Gradually it changed. Its light kept spreading out and condensed into a solid object. It became slender and long. The structure in the middle was slender and long. It was 2 meters long and could be held tightly with one hand. Yin Nuashing sized it up. It was not a sword. According to the shape, it should be a scepter or a spear. He did not wait for long. The 2 ends of the slender light changed at the same time. A wide part condensed at one end and was divided into 2 parts. There was only a gap of 2 to 3 centimeters in the middle. The part on the right side was slender and sharp, like the tip of a spear. On the other end of the spear, another part condensed at the end of the slender structure. It also looked like the tip of a spear, but it was relatively short. Moreover, There were 3 rings that kept shrinking from top to bottom. The last ring was wrapped around the tip of the spear, and it would become a vague shape of a solid ring. If it covered the tip of the spear on the other end, it would look like a scepter. Yin Nuoxing frowned. For the time being, he could not tell what this thing that looked like a spear and a scepter was. Luli looked mysterious and did not intend to tell him, so he could only hold back. In his experience of several eras, he had seen many strange weapons. He had also seen weapons with similar shapes. However, there was no model in his mind that was similar to the one in front of him. He could not use it. Luli reached out and pinched the golden light, changing it slightly. Yin Nuoxing was dumbfounded. She could even pinch it herself. He could not understand the forging method of the heavenly god of origin. No, he felt that he could not learn this girl's forging method. At least, he had never tried to create a divine weapon that could destroy an entire world. He had made something more dangerous in the past, but it was not as terrible as this girl's. Okay, it's almost done. A minute later, Luli clapped her hands in satisfaction. The wriggling golden light suddenly froze. Different colors began to appear from the center of the handle. The golden light began to fade, and a layer of silver sparkling starlight was born from it. It quickly spread to both sides, and the 3 rings at the end of the handle solidified. There were 3 rings that looked like fragments of star region. There was a faint ring formation around each of the 3 rings. The light was dim, and if one did not pay attention, one would only see a black star region. At the end of the ring was a diamond-shaped crystal that was the same size as the handle. It was also shining with the color of the star region. The shape of the other end did not change. It looked like a blade of a giant axe, but the blade of the axe and the blade of the sword were integrated into one. It was not as large as the traditional blade of an axe. It was slender and narrow. The gap between the 2 blades was constantly spewing out the light of the star region and star particles. That's fast. Yin Nuoxing could not help but exclaim. The creation of a divine weapon was different from other weapons. It did not take much time, and the creation was just the beginning. As for what kind of changes it could have, it would depend on the individual's luck. The limitations of the material would not hinder much. Other weapons would be as they were when they were created. While they were not completely fixed, there was not much room for growth. But what is this? Yin Nuoxing asked curiously as she reached out to touch the weapon. Luli looked up at the void and shook her head. I can't remember. I remember that I saw a similar weapon in another world. I modified it with a little of my own. The core at the bottom is the secondary energy core of the divine weapon. It is connected to the void, and the main core communicates with all of the origin energy. It can also connect to the concept layer of the laws. Its energy is almost infinite. However, if it uses too much energy for a long time, it will enter a state of silence for a short period of time. When that happens, you will need to input your own energy to control it. It is recommended that you supplement it with your own energy when you use it. Luli held it in her hand and waved it around. Out of 10, I'll give a 9. It's a pity that with so many materials, it can't reach a perfect state. I've been collecting them for many years. For other you can slowly explore the remaining functions. Luli said as she placed the long-handled weapon in Yin Nuoxing's hand. She smiled. The latter took the weapon and was about to take a closer look when he heard what Luli said. Huh, you're giving it to me? He stared blankly at the weapon that was both a spear and a staff. For a moment, he did not react. He wanted to talk about the matter of weapon refinement, but he was disrupted by Luli's words. Yes, Luli nodded matter-of-factly. Her jade-like hand gently stroked his hand that was holding the weapon. She said, Since the first time you entered the pavilion of gathering fate, my seal had begun to be lifted. At that time, I knew that you were a divine body of the receptive soul and happened to be in the awakening period. From then on, I collected additional materials, intending to craft a divine weapon for you. Mainly, I was a little worried when I saw that the Nether Void Sword was broken. Counting up, the other divine bodies of the receptive soul are lacking in weapons. At least, I wanted you to bring one with you to protect you. I didn't expect it to take so long. Yin Nuoxing scratched his head. But I'm not lacking now. I still have a little more, Luli said. That's true. As she said that, she could not help but frown. She said softly, Who asked you to take so long? Those rare treasures that I asked you to collect are the energy nodes that this divine weapon uses to communicate with the concept of rules. They are like beacons. Without them, its power will be greatly reduced. I've been waiting for you to come, but after so long you didn't come. You only know how to play with other girls. As she said that, her voice was filled with grievance. Yin Nuashing saw her sad expression and could not help but smile bitterly. The next second, Luli raised her head and looked at him with a smile. She did not look sad at all. The underground palace was fun, right? I was watching you guys at that time. Hee hee, brother, you also learned my Luli divine art. Yin Nuashing's expression was indifferent. After this girl came back to life, she became heartless. He wondered who was the one who was still crying 6 hours ago. This point really did not change at all. However, it was better for him not to mention it. Otherwise, he would inevitably suffer a headbutt. With this girl's current skills and his defensive power, she could push him to the boundary of the plane with a single headbutt. He suddenly looked down and saw that her black hair reached his chest. He could not help but sigh. The girls around him had all grown very tall. Not to mention the two stupid dragons who were taller than him. Xian was at the same height as him. Other than Little Purple Soul, Xian, Yishi, and a few other little girls, only Yuer was at his height. However, that girl could only bury her face in his shoulder. The others could only be taller, not shorter. Looking at it this way, Luli's height was just right. She could support his chin with her hand. He could not help but reach out and pat her head. He muttered to himself, this is a familiar height. It's so convenient. As soon as this sentence came out, he was stunned for a moment. He calmly lowered his head and saw Lu Li's pretty face, which was so dark that it was shining. He recalled what he had just said and shuddered in his heart. He had already started to plan the route and planned to fly back from the middle plane. If he worked harder, he might be able to fly back before the world fragment came crashing down. Thinking of this, he nodded and began to beg for mercy. Please be gentler. Luli gritted her teeth and looked at him. She raised her head and used her head to hit him. That power caused even the void to retreat. So what if I didn't grow taller? Half an hour later, Yin Nuashing was carried back to the Jiwen Pavilion by Luli. As he expected, he was hit by the head of a hammer and had no idea where he was. The starry sky furnace that exploded was a desolate world that existed alone. In the end, when he came back to his senses, he saw a huge world group in front of him. Hiss! Yin Nuashing trembled and rubbed his chest. Luli ignored him and snorted softly. Then, she said, It seems that the Pantheon world has been a little chaotic recently. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath. His chest was still stuffy. The Pantheon world is still all right, but the outside world is going to be chaotic. I found something terrible earlier. It's related to the Dark Age. He told her about the Abyss Death Mist and the chaotic war that spread across the entire Yuan realm, as well as the Tide of Darkness. Abyss Death Mist. It's really an ancient thing. After hearing this, Luli frowned slightly and revealed a troubled expression. Seeing this, Yin Nuashing was stunned. She only expressed her distress and confusion, but did not express her surprise. In other words, she more or less knew about this. Is it strange? Seeing Yin Nuashing's strange look, Luli smiled faintly. It's true that there were bits and pieces of the mythological era in that puppet, but there were also some things that happened during the Dark Age. It's not much, but it happened to mention the Abyss Death Mist. It was recorded by a third party, and it didn't say much. It happened a long time ago, and it was something that happened on the front lines of a warrior. I didn't pay attention to that part of my memories until I became an Empyrean god of origin. One day, when I was sorting out my memories, I saw the Abyssal Death Mist. Out of curiosity, I wandered around the void, but, I'm not good at finding clues. Furthermore, it was something that happened 2 years ago, so I got impatient when I couldn't find anything, and then I stopped looking. Then I started to become impatient. Yin Nuashing glanced at Luli, who was laughing dryly. You're impatient. Your patience is like a curve. When you become patient depends on your mood at that time. Luli rolled her eyes at him and continued. But I still found something. It should be something that didn't leave behind any records. I found it in the void. Huh? How did you find it in the void again? Not to mention the two great reincarnations. There shouldn't be anything left in the void. Although the Empyrean God's creation could last for a long time in the void, it would definitely melt after millions of years. How could there be anything left behind? Lu Li's expression was solemn. What if something above the Empyrean God is left behind by the Empyrean God of origin? Yin Nuoxing's expression changed. According to what she had just pointed out, the Empyrean God of origin seemed to be able to break free from the shackles of the greater Yuan realm. Whether it was the order or the laws, the shackles would at least be weakened. If the Empyrean God of origin's creation was left in the void, seeing the change of expression on his face, Lu Li said faintly, "The Empyrean God of origin's creation has the power to distort reality. Even the void has to avoid it. It is already a transcendent being, a beast out of the cage. Of course, most of the records I've found have disappeared. It's not completely indestructible in the void. It's just that it took a very long time. Moreover, it stayed in the depths of the void very, very far away. It was probably slapped there by an external force. It just happened to escape the encirclement of the abyssal death mist and the tide of darkness." Lu Li stretched herself and continued. What was recorded was the words of an Empyrean God of origin. So I speculate that was thrown out from the center of the void of the Eight Elements realm. The remaining information that was relatively clear mentioned the abyssal death mist and the tide of darkness, as well as some unknown things. That guy was also a fierce man. He fought his way into the enemy's camp against the abyssal death mist. It didn't say how he got in, but it did say this. It's very interesting. Yin Nuoxing's expression flickered. Enemy's camp, the base of the abyssal death mist and the tide of darkness. In other words, it was indeed a force that existed in this world, just like the ancient and unknown force that the thing he encountered back then provoked. No wonder it could overturn the entire Eight Elements realm by itself. If it was them, they should have the same power. Seeing that he was a little excited, Lu Li gently pressed his hand and said, "Brother Yu, the tide of darkness probably has nothing to do with them because they have different marks of laws. I know. I've faced the tide of darkness and the abyssal death mist. I already know a little about it. Let's not talk about this first. Did the record mention where the tide of darkness came from?" Yin Nuoxing waved his hand. Lu Li took a deep look at him, pondered for a moment, and nodded. "The neighbor of the realm of gods, the underworld." Yin Nuoxing slightly widened his eyes. He opened his mouth a few times, but could not say anything. Only strange words leaked out from his throat. He knew that Lu Li would not make fun of him. If there was no problem with the record, then it was probably true. However, the Empyrean God of origin that suddenly killed its way into the enemy's camp sounded somewhat suspicious. However, his intuition told him that this might be the correct answer. After all, it was the information left behind by the Empyrean God of origin, and no matter how much of a conspiracy it was, it had nothing to do with them. So, he quickly dispelled the many doubts in his mind. And if it was really the underworld, then many things could be solved. The underworld was originally the companion realm of the realm of gods. Although the people of the two realms had never interacted with each other, you could not ignore the existence of your neighbor, even if he did not go out. The commotion caused by his neighbor would always reach your ears. See, during the Dark Age, your neighbor did something earth-shattering. Good Lord, it directly destroyed the Grand Yuan realm. It was true that the realm of gods was surrounded by a barrier of order, but it was a kind of conceptual and order-based protection. Although it stood there in reality, the barrier only separated the concepts of the two places inside and outside the realm of gods. People outside the realm of gods knew about the realm of gods, but all their directional thoughts about the realm of gods would become vague. They would not even think about going to the realm of gods, nor would they think about living there. They would not even think about where the realm of gods was because the realm of gods had become a meaningful and practical name. However, it only existed in the imagination. So, no one would treat it as real and pursue it. However, the netherworld was different. The netherworld was a neighbor and was only separated from the god realm by a single wall. Frankly speaking, the netherworld could be considered family, so the barrier of order naturally didn't isolate the netherworld from the god realm. This was why he was able to accurately throw an incomparably large and powerful brick from the middle plane to the god realm. What was wrong with a naughty brat throwing a rock into his own home? Although what he threw was not a pebble, but a brick, and currently, no one could hang him up and give him a good beating. The neighbor came to tear down your house. Yin Nuashing asked subconsciously. No, the neighbor tore down the Yuan realm. Azurite shook her head. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. After thinking about it, his face became even more bitter. He spread his hands helplessly. It's useless even if we know the name. We don't know where the underworld is. Even if we know where the underworld is, we can't fight our way in. Even if we are lucky enough to fight our way in, we will only end up being surrounded and beaten to death by thousands of soldiers. That's right. Azurite pouted and said, I don't have the memory of the battle in the Dark Age, so I don't know about this. But I know another piece of information that will make Brother You feel even worse. Ah, right, I remember now. There are records about this. Because it was not useful, it was sealed for too long and forgotten. Yin Nuashing was slightly stunned. He shook his head helplessly. This brat was as reckless as ever. What did you forget? The Lord of the Underworld is a heavenly god above the origin god, the primeval god. Azurite sighed and shook her head helplessly. These are all realms of the mythological era. I took a glance at it. Because I felt that it might not be useful, I threw it into the depths of my memory and sealed it. I couldn't remember these things for a while. During the Dark Age, no one knew if the primeval god had appeared. But combined with what Brother You just said, I don't think so. The thing inside the white light was most likely the Lord of the Underworld. That was why it had the ability to pierce through the entire Yuan realm alone. The realm of the gods in the Dark Age was proven to have the origin god, but what was the use of that? They were all destroyed. Yin Nuashing's expression suddenly became absent-minded. He muttered unnaturally, the beginning of the primeval realm. The primeval is the origin. I'm a little dizzy. What should I do? I feel that the road ahead is not only endless, but also a dark abyss. He only felt that it was funny. What was all this? After climbing over a small hill to look at the scenery, what he saw when he looked back was an even more exaggerated peak. It was daunting, and there was fear in his heart. He felt that he could not climb up at all. These realms existed in name only in this era. There were only 5 heavenly gods and 1.5 origin gods. As for the primeval god, forget about it. It was better to just think about it. There were probably some transcendental forces that were so reclusive that they could suffocate themselves to death. For example, the underworld or them. There was no need to talk about the former. With the power of the realm of the gods, they probably had never suffered the calamity of the great samsara. They had countless opportunities to rest and recuperate. That was why they jumped out to cause trouble during the Dark Age, and then came out again after almost 80 years. Those bastards really did cause trouble whenever they wanted to. Even when they came out for a stroll, they had the momentum to destroy the world. Chapter 1119. What actually happened during the Dark Age was something that could not be explored. Even Azurite, who had experienced, or at least watched from the side, would not know. The Phantom Marionette had been damaged when it was retrieved, and the information it contained served as a guide, at least allowing Yin Nuashing and the others to know something that no one else knew. Coincidentally, this stupid thing would probably happen again. Not to mention that the information would definitely be useful, but at least they would know who would die in the hands of if they were to die in battle in the future, right? They would die without knowing why. Yin Nua planet had already tried hundreds of millions of times, and they were blown up together with the entire world dying without knowing anything. He could not help but stare blankly at the thought. At the time, Zero had watched him being blown up along with a world of light in the mortal realm. In other words, those who went down to carry out the execution gods were probably of the level of the Empyrean god of origin, or even higher. After all, he had been to the triple elemental realm before, and the protection and suppression from the first great heavenly god prevented him from squeezing out enough energy to destroy an entire world. In other words, they were probably of the level of the Empyrean god of origin. According to Azurite, she was already able to partially ignore the rules of the grand elemental realm and the realm of gods. So the protection of the first great heavenly god should more or less offset some of it. Underworld. Returning to the original topic, Yin Nuashing stretched himself. I'm not mentally prepared to face my old neighbor in the future. Speaking of which, can we assume that they just threw a brick over and did not? All right. I'll be serious. The tide of darkness has already appeared, and regardless of whether the Void Shroud is destroying the world layer by layer according to its original route and plan, it has already destroyed a lot of worlds and infiltrated 3 planes. Now, the people of the underworld are probably watching the progress bar, waiting to see when it reaches 50 or 60% before jumping out and attacking the center of the void in the 8th elemental realm. But I really don't want to do that right now. Luli looked at him helplessly and shook her head. In just a few hours, she had seen him change little by little. He, who had once been able to focus on his own heart without wavering in the endless years, was now a little shaken. He had become a little dispirited, a little self-destructive and discouraged. He would do whatever she said without asking questions or asking questions. He would just sigh and take everything she said as the truth. It was just like how he used to be in her heart. Everything he said was right. Of course, even at this moment, Lu Li's heart had never changed, but brother you. Lu Li gently held Yin Nuashing's hand. Her red lips moved, but she could not make a sound. His eyelids drooped slightly, and his originally straight body seemed to bend a little. The expression of someone who was past his prime and had experienced the vicissitudes of life appeared on his face. He seemed to have lost his drive and fighting spirit. This made Lu Li very worried, but she did not know how to solve it. Yin Nuashing looked at her worried face and knew that the negative emotions in his heart had piled up on his face. However, this was not something that could be overcome by clenching his teeth. If he could get through this by clenching his teeth, he would not be in such a state. Back then, the heavenly god of primal chaos also felt a little powerless. Things that he could not control kept popping up one after another. Perhaps this was the result of him not trusting this world. However, he had seen the combat strength of the divine realm. What could he rely on to trust this world? He had hypnotized himself that someone would definitely jump out to help him at a critical moment. Save it. Even his dreams were more realistic than this. The one who jumped out was not a cabbage. It had to be a heavenly god who could suppress the void, or even the heavenly god of origin. Slap. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and slapped his cheeks hard with both hands. He closed his eyes and let his eyeballs roll around a few times. Then he exhaled and opened his eyes. What a headache. Lu Li's expression lit up slightly when she saw him. He had pulled himself together. However, he was just forcing himself to stay strong. This was his strength. He would force himself to stay strong until he could no longer hold on. He would go crazy, force himself into a dead end, and then be trapped in the box. This kind of state could pull himself together in the short term, but he had begun to ignore the consequences. Yin Nuashing waved his hand. The light in the depths of his eyes flickered. His 2 diamond-shaped pupils turned very quickly and had already become a strange vertical pupil. He looked at Lu Li and said, "What do you plan to do?" "Huh?" Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and looked straight into her eyes. "The current situation is very serious, but I can't tell how serious it is. Let's just treat it as a world-ending disaster. However, the world-ending here is the 8 elements realm or the great elemental realm. I know you know that I don't trust this world. Yes, I don't trust it. If I wait for others to solve everything, it will be too late by the time everything happens, let alone now where the rules have withered. I don't have much time to believe in what this world can have, but my own strength is not enough to push or fight for anything for myself. Let me be frank." Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and looked straight into her eyes. Luli, I need you. At least, for the present that I cherish. I have to do my everything. Luli's seven-colored eyes blinked. After a moment, she smiled sweetly, making this part of the world extremely bright. She nodded hard and said, "Okay." After getting a response, Yin Nuashing also nodded. He looked up at the sky and said, "Do you plan to stay here or go to the Nine Gods Temple with me?" Luli thought for a moment and shook her head. "Since Brother Yu is going to make a move, I also need to make some preparations. I won't go to the Nine Gods Temple with you. However, you can find me at any time. That spear has the power of my godly right and godhood left behind. You can find me, unconditionally." Yin Nuashing looked at the spear that was standing beside him like a spear. He thought for a moment and understood something. His expression became strange. "You're planning to keep this thing to monitor me, aren't you?" Luli's body trembled. She turned her head guiltily and said, "No, you're thinking too much." Yin Nuashing stared at her with a faint smile. He didn't say anything, but there was nothing he could say. He had already eaten the spear. He was just curious whether this girl had any plans. He had already gotten the answer. The girl's face became redder and redder under his gaze. Finally, she couldn't help but lower her head and mutter, "I'm just worried that you'll disappear." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this answer. He shook his head helplessly and said, "The void is so big, but it's only so big. With your current realm, it's just a matter of moving your hands if you want to drag me out of the Eight Elements realm." "You're exaggerating," Luli muttered. Before Yin Nuashing could think of something to say, she quickly took something out of nowhere and put it on the table. "By the way, this is for you." Yin Nuashing lowered his head and glanced at it. He was a little surprised. However, when he thought about how she had personally forged a divine weapon for him, he wasn't particularly surprised. It was a sword hilt. The black sword hilt was engraved with golden patterns. That was all. However, if one looked closely, they would find that there was a faint black mist surging around the place where the sword had disappeared. It was faintly mixed with the space around it. It only reduced one's visibility a little, but it didn't condense into a ball of mist. The Dark Abyss sword was ranked third in the Divine Sword record. It was a super divine weapon made of pure, dark, elemental energy. Moreover, it was the only one he knew so far. It was a divine weapon of great success. It didn't take much effort to deal with the heavenly god of origin. He said the same thing back then. He thought that he had a great advantage when he had 4 divine weapons of great success. Then he was defeated. Logically speaking, he was just a small little demigod. There was a gap between him and a heavenly god. His body couldn't make up for it. Moreover, he was worried that with his current strength, if he unleashed 4 or even 8 times the power of the Dark Abyss sword, he would collapse first. He wasn't so weak that he couldn't control the power of his divine weapon. Unless he was exhausted, he wouldn't suffer a backlash. However, he was worried that if he unleashed that power, it would cause a series of riots that would kill him. Azurite pushed the Dark Abyss sword forward and nodded at him. "The Dark Abyss sword. Brother Yu, you shouldn't be surprised. I found it in a place outside the realm of the gods. It will be of great help to you. Moreover, I'm not used to using these things. I've temporarily sealed it to Tier 9, so that you won't be swallowed by the phenomenon caused by the energy riots. But for now, Tier 9 should be enough. Moreover, you don't lack it." Of course, he wasn't surprised. He was even struck by the sword back then. Actually, I think it might be better for you to keep it. The power of the heavenly god of origin should be able to unleash 90% or even 100% of the Dark Abyss sword's power." Azurite smiled and shook her head. "I'll pass. It's easier for me to use my own weapon." Yin Nuashing hesitated for a moment, but didn't refuse. He had been collecting divine swords since a long time ago, and now was no exception. By the way, in the Blood Demon Valley of the Kuan Yuan region, the 5th demonic blood sword is there, and the 9th Shadowlight sword seems to be inside the sun. Azurite looked at him with a little surprise and nodded. "All right, I'll find time to get it for you. If I've already gotten it, I'll let you know. If you're doing something, just let me know. There's no need to waste time going to a place. Time is of the essence. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment and said seriously, I think I'll be killed by them. That's why I haven't dared to go. Azurite was speechless, holding the dark abyss sword in his hand. Yin Nuashing looked at the low-light zone and shook the sword's hilt. He nodded and took the dark abyss sword into his body with his divine body's origin. There's also a black pattern in his soul, which happened to be connected to the mark of the dark abyss sword. He had long been able to control his origin to absorb or not. The state where he didn't reject anything back then was purely caused by his origin not being able to control it well. Then that's it for now. I have to go to the little divine land. Well, I promise you that I won't disappear for no reason. But I can't disappear in this life either, so... Yin Nuashing was halfway through his words when Azurite waved her hand and interrupted him. Do you have any plans? Yin Nuashing showed a mysterious smile. Do you still remember that day when the Red Lotus Hellfire burned the world? You asked me what I did. Azurite thought for a moment and remembered. You said you left a gift for the realm of the gods. Are you referring to that? Let's look forward to it. It's something good. It's a foundation that I left behind, one of the few. Azurite thought about it and felt that she couldn't agree with what he said. They risked their lives to create a bunch of suns and an entire world of divine armaments. In the end, he said that he didn't leave behind much. The treasures that I left behind still need to be opened. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste? Yin Nuashing laughed and turned to walk out of the pavilion. Just as he took 2 steps, he was hugged from behind. He stopped and shook his head helplessly. He turned around and hugged the girl. Azurite whispered, Be careful. I've been watching you. Don't worry. A cloud of mist came in front of his eyes. The feeling of moving backward was born in his mind. A few seconds later, the white mist in front of him quietly burst like a bubble. The chaotic space around him also quickly disappeared. After another blink of an eye, Yin Nuashing walked out of the myriad dragon mountains and returned to the ghostly forest. Xian and the others who were wandering around in the forest out of boredom saw Yin Nuashing come out. They quickly went up to him and looked at him. Before they could say anything, they were stunned. They seemed to feel that there was a slight change in him. He seems to be a little more haggard. He seems to have become a little crazy. Chill. Let's observe him first. Xian and the others looked at each other and instantly communicated with their eyes. Then, Xian smiled and said, How was it? Did you see him? Yin Nuashing nodded and sighed. I saw him. I got a lot of information after walking around. Let's not talk about that first. Time is of the essence. Let's go back to the 9 God shrine first, and then go to Little Divine Land. Xian and the others looked at each other. Although they did not know what happened in just half a day, they thought that it was an important matter. They did not ask much. They would know when the time came. Yin Nuashing nodded. He waved his hand and directly teleported back to the 9 Gods shrine. Yin Nuashing and the others had just teleported back to the hall of the Fire God Temple. Their vision had just stabilized, and they had just stood still and looked at the surrounding situation. They could not help but be stunned. The hall was full of corpses, and Yuan, Shi, and Mo Yin were almost hanging on the crystal chandelier on the ceiling. The few girls, led by Chu Yingzhan, were also lying everywhere without any reservation. It looked like they had walked into a mass grave instead of temple hall. Yin Nuashing rubbed his eyes and confirmed that he was indeed standing in the hall of the Fire God shrine. He then put his hands on his waist and shouted, Get up! We're in a hurry. Let's go. We're going to Little Divine Land to cause trouble. Then a group of people climbed up from all directions of the hall with an earth-shattering momentum. After a series of clattering sounds, they left the hall in a mess and hurriedly fled for their lives. As soon as everyone left, the guards rushed into the hall. They were at a loss when they saw the crystal chandelier swinging in the air like a swing, the sofa that had been torn apart, and the coffee table and chairs that were almost overturned. Didn't I just feel the breath of the young master? Why is it gone? Is there a beast in the hall? Don't talk. Hurry up and clean up. You didn't feel anything. The group of culprits who messed up the hall were now at the border between the northern wilderness and Little Divine Land. In front of them was a huge and exaggerated barrier. The black energy was like a surging flame that was constantly fluttering from the bottom to the top. Looking inside, it was a chaotic and disorderly scene. They couldn't see anything. When they carefully sensed this huge bowl barrier that covered a large area, they couldn't even feel its existence. Even the surrounding space couldn't be sensed. They seemed to be standing in front of a huge black hole, and everything seemed to have disappeared. The dark elemental barrier. It's been a long time. The scene of me controlling it here is still vivid in my mind. After that, I haven't been inside much. However, I heard from others that the vitality has been restored inside, and the rules of the ancient era have been preserved. It's really incredible. The dark elemental energy should be able to dig a hole in the rules there. I didn't expect it to protect the inside instead. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but sigh. He was the only one who was in the group. The others were sighing. They had originally planned to enter when they were demigods, but it had been delayed until now. Wow, this is the little divine lands barrier that you guys were talking about. It's so spectacular. It was a girl who was curious about everything in the realm of the gods, especially these world-class scenery. Although the demon realm also had its own scenery, to her, the sky over there was dark and gloomy red. Just this point alone made her feel bored. Even looking at anything would make her feel bored. Xian looked at it for a while. Thinking of Yin Nuashing's desperate state, she quickly asked, "How do we open this? A little star?" Yin Nuashing frowned at this moment. He crossed his arms and looked at the huge black barrier. Something's wrong. He waved his hand, and a circular projection appeared in front of him. It was the scene of the celestial realm using the observer's eye. The projection happened to be looking down from the top of the sky. He kept enlarging the projection and finally locked on to the black spot in the center of the celestial realm. After a while, he could clearly see that there was a strange puncture wound at the top of the black barrier in the projection. The golden color was particularly obvious against the black background, as if something had fallen from the sky and penetrated the barrier. The barrier is broken? F*CK. Is this serious? Nightmare was so excited that his hair stood on end. The barrier exploded. The dark element inside can't be. Don't get too excited. Yin Nuashing shook his head. The dark element back then had turned into a barrier that isolated this place for a long time. There won't be any leakage. Frankly speaking, the dark element barrier now is only to preserve the independence of the little divine land and the ancient laws inside. This is an accident. I didn't think too much about it back then. As for this scar, he pinched his bangs. This is an injury caused by the power of time. Let's take a look first. I wonder if the will that was left on the barrier is still there. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and took a step forward. He stretched out his hand and touched the barrier. It was cold to the touch and was as hard as steel. At the same time, a chaotic energy was born from the space, but it did not affect the barrier at all. Black energy condensed in front of everyone's eyes, and it did not take long before it condensed into a solid figure. However, it was like a mist that would dissipate at any moment. Everyone was familiar with the figure, but it also felt a little strange. They knew this figure. The original body was right in front of them, but the original body had changed so much that even he himself could not recognize it. As for the last time they saw a similar appearance, it was at the peak of the god realm, when he had recovered his celestial god body. The figure in front of them was also wearing a demonic godlike armor. It could be considered light armor, and it did not appear to be heavy. The figure appeared, and the cloak behind him swayed. The pair of deep black eyes immediately saw Yin Nuashing. Even if he could not recognize himself, the connection between him and the figure was like a brain and an arm. How could he not recognize him? The figure nodded slightly, and his emotionless and cold voice slowly sounded. The barrier's consciousness reports to you. The barrier of the small divine land is still intact. In the time, unable to be verified. It has vaguely locked onto the big origin realm for the past half a month. In the past half a month, it has been hit by a time attack. The aura of the attack has been determined to be of the same origin. The barrier did not counterattack. Yuanshi could not help but scratch his head. What does it mean to determine the aura of the attack as of the same origin? Yin Nuashing glanced at him and said calmly, "In other words, I was the one who launched the attack, because it sensed the same aura, it did not put up any defense. Unfortunately, the power of time had a strong destructive power, so it tore a hole in the sky." Huh. Everyone was stunned. In the past half a month, they did not come here, did they? Yin Nuashing immediately thought of something. Oh, I have a guess. Half a month ago, when I was still subduing the divine flame, I noticed that something was wrong. Something was disturbing the energy loop in my Feng Ers and little purple souls, causing us to wake up 600 years later. Ahem, did you see what the thing that attacked us was? The eyes of the barrier's consciousness flashed with brilliance. It nodded. It's confirmed. The attack came from the Sword of Time. As soon as it said that, other than Yin Nuashing who had expected it, everyone else was shocked. Chapter 1120. The Time Sand Sword was ranked 4th in the Divine Sword record. Yin Nuashing had already obtained it when he was in Xiaoguang City. However, due to his lack of skill and knowledge, he could not repair it. In the small world of the elemental stone, he saw the time crack, so he thought of a plan and threw the Time Sand Sword into the Sea of Time to let it repair itself. He only left behind the original imprint of the divine body of spiritual reception. Unless he died, no one could get it. That imprint was for the convenience of retrieving it in the future. Only the heavens knew how long it would take to repair the sand sword in the Sea of Time. Only the heavens knew if it had fully recovered. If it even had a soul, there was no way for him to retrieve it. He could only squat at the side and cry. But now that he saw the time sand sword piercing through the barrier of the small divine land, he was relieved. At least the aura on the time sand sword was determined to be of the same origin, so the latter did not resist. Speaking of which, if these two really collided, the entire divine land would be finished. The time sand sword is made from the endless power of time and the power of the natural order. It has probably recovered to its peak state, so when it broke through space and fell from the Sea of Time, it affected the things with similar auras. Yes, at that time, I was subduing the divine flame, so I was in a special time loop. But the power of the time sand sword was of a higher level than the closed time loop I made, so it affected us inside, even though that was not its intention. So at that time, our energy loop was affected, and we woke up 600 years later. The time sand sword also pierced a hole in the barrier of the small divine land. Yin Nuashing tried to explain as simply as possible. After thinking for a while, she said simply, "To put it simply, the power of the time sand sword has a higher priority in the attribute of time. Its level on the world stairway is higher than mine, so it affected me. If it was the other way around, my level on the world stairway is higher than its level, then it could not affect me, but I would still fall into the small divine land." After listening for 5 seconds, everyone understood. Then they let out a long "oh." Moreover, they were very rational and did not ask what the stairway of the world was. If they had to explain something that they did not understand, it would take hundreds or thousands of words. That time scar is a fixed scar. It won't expand or shrink. It's fixed there, and it's very simple to deal with. I'll leave it to you. Yin Nuashing said to the stronghold's consciousness, "Now, open the door first. While you're at it, throw some things related to the Sword of Time into our minds. Oh, be gentle with them. They can't take it." The barrier's consciousness suddenly made a rather human-like gesture. It tilted its head and nodded in realization. With a wave of its right hand, a circular portal appeared in front of it. Its faint and emotionless voice was heard. "Understood. The door leads to the central zone." Yin Nuashing nodded. Just as she was about to walk in with her people, she quickly thought of something. "Oh, by the way, prepare the treasure. It might be useful in the near future. As for the specific time, anyway, just prepare it first. I'll inform you when the time comes." "Understood." With a wave of his hand, he led everyone into the circular portal and disappeared. The stronghold's consciousness watched them disappear into the portal. After confirming that the portal was closed, it swayed its body and came to the top of the small divine land stronghold. next to the time scar. It was a golden crack that looked like glass shards imprinted on space. It was at least 100,000 miles wide, and there were countless crisscrossing small cracks on the edges. It made the crack look exceptionally ferocious. The Stronghold's consciousness reached out and squeezed hard at the time scar. Begin the operation. Their vision became chaotic as the world spun. Everything was pulled into a long arc, and the whole world was spinning. This reminded everyone of a bad memory. Back in the Five Elements realm, they were inexplicably attracted to Leviathan by a force. In the end, they were smashed into the ground at a speed many times faster than the speed of light. They were probably lucky that they did not crash into the world. Everyone who recalled the incident felt their stomachs churn. Only Xian was a little calmer. She did not experience being smashed into the ground at the speed of light. At this moment, she grabbed Yin Nuashing and spun it around, but she was still calm. "I hope I don't fall to the ground in 5 or 6 pieces," Nightmare said calmly. Then, she retched and almost burst into tears. Everyone was speechless. All of a sudden, the spinning world calmed down. Stepping on solid ground, the fishy smell of soil and grass filled their nostrils. However, everyone's eyes were still bent into the shape of a mosquito coil, swaying like a tree in a violent wind. Splash! Water! Appercent and asterisk. At the sound of someone falling into the water and screaming shocked everyone. However, they saw more than a dozen double images and could not focus at all. They could only judge from a sound that it was the unlucky Chu Chun who fell into the water. "Little Chun, don't move. Be careful not to sink. I'll get you after you recover," Chu Yingzhan said. Finally, she was lucky enough to bump into a tree. She held onto the trunk and slid to the ground, twitching like a shrimp. It took a few minutes for everyone to find their own position and lie on the ground to avoid bumping into something unknown. Chu Chun had already stopped struggling and was floating on the water like a floating corpse. When everyone sat down, they hurriedly circulated the energy in their bodies to calm the dizziness in their minds. At the same time, they processed a lot of information in their minds, all of which were related to the small divine land and the time sand sword. Other than that, there was another very important thing. Although they felt dizzy with their eyes closed, they could feel that something in their bodies had been activated, and it was an explosive activation. The feeling was like being unable to speak for 100,000 years and finally roaring out a word. Just by hearing their own roars, they felt like they were going to ascend to immortality. That was the sudden activation of the star Fate, which was also the main reason why their minds were in a mess. Previously, they had imagined countless scenarios, such as ascending to immortality in broad daylight and being struck by lightning for 3 days and 3 nights before being enlightened. However, they did not expect that they would be so dizzy that they could not find themselves. "Boss, ugh, the star Fate has been activated. Ugh, I'm so King dizzy." Nightmare's handsome face was pale. Every time he spoke, he retched and tears flowed down his face. Yuanshi propped himself up and struggled for a while before lying down again. "How do you feel?" My voice has become a little clearer. Is your voice better?" Yuanshi was speechless. "No, it seems to have become my voice when I was 17 or 18 years old. Listen, it doesn't sound as manly as usual. If you say that out loud, the boss will beat you to death." Everyone nodded in understanding. There were 4 men in the team, and one of them was a girl from the beginning to the end. If there was someone who did not sound manly, it would be him. Even the crazy girl Chu Yingzhan was more manly than him. Ming lay face down on the ground, the wings on his back flapping. "Where's my brother?" "I don't know. I feel like the whole Yuan world is spinning. I don't have time to see where the boss is." "Bro, answer me. Your sister is calling you. Did you throw her out?" After waiting for a few minutes, everyone slowly opened their eyes. A faint light began to gather in front of their eyes. Their shaking vision was trying to focus, but they could finally see what their surroundings looked like. The sky was dark and gloomy. If that was the sky, everyone thought that it was the void. They had dealt with the void many times, so they could quickly recognize the appearance of the void. Moreover, The scene of faint purple and black blending in the distance confirmed their thoughts. Although they were in the void, it was not completely dark. A bright light came from nowhere, allowing them to see the situation around them clearly. The bright light made them feel like there might be an invisible sun. The place where they landed was beside a 10-meter-wide river. The river was not turbulent, which could be seen from a large floating object hanging on the river. Chu-chun had been floating there for almost 10 minutes and had not been washed away. The riverside was an open space that was not very wide. There were some messy footprints among the fine green grass. It could be seen that they were from the same small creature. The footprints were only 2 fingers wide, but it was obvious that it was very powerful. There was only one type of footprints beside the water source, which should be occupied by some powerful demon beast. Since they had fallen here, they might have been discovered by it. Looking into the distance, they could only see a dense forest. Through the gaps in the forest, they could see the situation faintly. They seemed to be on a higher ground. Looking into the distance, they could only see the void. There was also a faint light coming from below. Xian calmed himself down and slowly stood up. He called out in his soul, "Little star, where are you?" There was no response from his soul, which made everyone's hearts turn cold. In this unfamiliar place, no matter how out of the norm that guy was, he would have to move around to be able to use it. With his thin and frail demigod body, he would be done for if he touched anything. Just as everyone's hearts sank, a shrill voice came from the soul. I'm here. I'm fine. You guys wait." That shrill voice was like the voice of a little girl who had yet to go through puberty. Everyone was stunned when they heard it, but he had already cut off the connection in time, so no one could investigate further. They were all confused. Chu-chun climbed out of the water. He shook off the water on his body and looked up. He could not help but point at Yuan-shi in Nightmare. "Hey, you two have become younger." Everyone turned to look at Yuan-shi and Mo Yin when they heard this. They saw that Yuan-shi and Mo Yin had changed from looking like they were in their 20s to looking like they were 18 years old. They didn't find it strange when they thought about the rejuvenation that they had mentioned earlier. Yuan-shi looked at the river and had a strange expression. "That's not right. I'm still young. How can I be rejuvenated?" Nightmare said casually, "Maybe the stars felt that your soul was old and shrunk you. By the way, so did I, but I didn't change." Chu Yingxian pointed at herself. Fenger thought for a moment. "Maybe they felt that you were young enough." Yuan-shi rolled his eyes at her. "That's strange. Look, only the 2 of us have become younger. If both of us were to become younger, with little star's incredible soul age, wouldn't it be?" Yuan-shi was suddenly stunned. Everyone looked at each other in shock. Thinking back to Yun Nuoxing's voice and how he had hurriedly cut off the soul communication, they all felt that some shocking secret had been exposed. Then, the fire of gossip burned in their eyes. They sensed in their souls. As expected, he had cut off the connection and could not find him. Fenger's nose twitched. Her eyes lit up. She smiled and pointed at the forest. "This way, follow me." Before she could finish her sentence, little Bing had already run out with a whoosh. The soul link between the 2 of them could not be concealed. The group of people had sinister smiles on their faces. They tiptoed and followed Bing and Fenger into the forest. After walking for only 2 minutes, the 2 girls stopped. They climbed behind a tree and peeked inside. Seeing this, the others could not wait to squeeze in and take a look inside. They saw that in an empty space between a few trees, there was a huge tree root that protruded 2 to 3 meters out of the ground. At this time, sitting on the tree root was a little unfamiliar Loli. Her skin was as white as translucent ice crystals. She had dazzling eyes and 2 diamond-shaped pupils. Her face was really delicate and cute. The most conspicuous thing was the long, colorful hair that was almost tied up behind the little girl's back. The hair was held in her hands and kept fiddling with it. It was really tied up. There were also pieces of grass and wood tangled in the hair, as if she had dragged it from the grass for a distance. That ridiculously thick, colorful hair and that starry robe had buried half of her body. Everyone looked at each other in horror. The guess in their hearts was confirmed. After this guy came back, he went into the small divine land with the star of fate. In the end, he turned into an 11 or 12-year-old lowly. They felt that their worldview was about to collapse. Damn it, what terrible thing did this hair go through to be tied up like this? Yin Nuashing sat on the tree root. His face was covered in sweat as he fiddled with the long, colorful hair that was tied up into a spiral. The more he could not untie it, the more agitated he became. The more agitated he was, the more he could not untie it. He was so agitated that he did not notice that someone was peeping behind him. He even forgot to take care of his current body. Xian also looked at him anxiously. After staring at him for 2 minutes, he finally could not help but fly to his side and press his head. You can't untie it like this, why? Yin Nuashing did not notice that there was someone behind him. He was so scared that his soul almost flew out of his body. He shot forward and turned around to glare at Xian angrily. Why didn't you make any sound when you walked? No. How did you find me? Wah. Don't look. Don't look. I don't want to live anymore. Everyone listened and broke out in cold sweat. This guy's persona was collapsing. Xian walked over and hugged him without saying anything. He pressed his head with one hand and said softly, "Shut up, sit still, and don't move." The small Yin Nuashing trembled all over as he recalled the fear of being dominated by them. His small body curled up as he trembled. Everyone who saw this did not know whether to laugh or cry. Indeed, there was always one thing to conquer another. After this fellow became small, he was directly suppressed. This is the buffer zone, the last checkpoint before entering the small China. It's to prevent too many people from rushing into the small China and causing the space here to become unstable. It's also used to prevent people with dangerous objects from entering the small China, so as to prevent the barrier from disintegrating from the inside. As you all know, once someone starts looking for trouble, there's no way to stop them. This buffer zone is designed to forcibly prevent people from entering the small China. It's either to kill them or not to let them in. This is a piece of land that I casually plucked over and turned into a floating island. There's still a huge amount of energy and life energy remaining on it. I just learned that something incredible has been nurtured here. Of course, it's only for ordinary people. It might even be a paradise now. The barrier's consciousness has divided the buffer zone into several regions and randomly tossed people all over the world. Under normal circumstances, it won't show itself. The central region is the place with the highest energy concentration, which is where we're at right now. There's probably a lot of natural treasures there, but well, they're not of any use to us. The small Yun Nuashing explained the situation in this space in a brisk and childish voice. Xian and Feng were behind him, playing with his long, curly hair. Yuanqi looked at this big lowly, awkwardly. His cheeks twitched. Then how do we get to the small China? Why don't you look at the information the barrier's consciousness gave you? Chu Yingzhan said in annoyance. I just looked through everything. We just need to go to the other side of the buffer zone. It's not that far for us. If Dumbo takes us there, we'll be there in one teleport. We'll be in the real small China after we get there. Yin Nuashing nodded. If you're interested, you can take a look at the buffer zone, especially the celestial luck in your bodies. It's already starting to take effect. Nightmare scratched his head. Other than becoming younger and more energetic, I can't detect any other changes. Well, don't worry. It's all subtle. Yin Nuashing stood up and looked into the distance. I like to rush and directly sit down. Don't move. Wait for me to finish before we rush in. Xian pushed him down and stared at the pretty Mei Mao. Yin Nuashing shivered and shrunk his body even smaller. He mumbled so much that no one knew what to say. After all the preparations were done, Yin Nuashing was almost done with the girls. Everyone stood up and prepared to jump off the cliff. Yin Nuashing waved his hand. Then let's fly over slowly. Fly over. Bing suddenly lifted him up excitedly and hugged him in her arms. She took the lead and rushed out, leaving behind a silly laugh. Hee hee, the daddy of the small one. Wah, you stupid dragon. Put me down. Put me down. I'm not a doll. I'm with you. You can't be so rude just because I've become smaller. I'm your father, not your son. I'm a very mature soul in front of you. Help. I'm going to die. I'm too ashamed to face anyone. Everyone was speechless. This guy had completely let himself go. Clouds of black fog wandered in the desolate wilderness. A faint mist filled the sky and earth. It was the wandering, dark, elemental energy, but it had already lost its power and became a decoration. At most, it dimmed the sky and earth slightly, but it couldn't obstruct the view of the ground. However, all that could be seen was the desolate land and jagged rocks. The ground was full of man-made cracks, which should have been there during a battle. Occasionally, there would be black waves in the sky, as if something was disturbing the void and the dark elemental energy. It was as if a giant beast was lurking in the void. The small divine land was ultimately cut off from the god realm. There was a void between the two. The explosion of dark elemental energy back then didn't completely destroy this place, but caused another kind of terrible destruction. Even if one went from the buffer zone to the small divine land, one could still see the edge of the void. It's a bit desolate. There aren't many people. She kept looking around. The buffer zone wasn't very big. It was only the size of a large city. It's probably because there aren't many people coming in at this time. The small divine land isn't a place you can enter as you wish. The isolation between this place and the outside world is very serious. Sometimes it takes 1,000 years for news to spread in the god realm, Nightmare said. But there's another big news breaking into the small divine land. Qinyan glanced at Yin. She had pretty much sorted out the information. She already knew a lot of things before she even went in. Yin looked at Xian and the others with a wronged expression. He wanted them to help him save him from Bing Air's arms, but they only looked at him with interest. Their eagerness to try made him despair. He didn't know what kind of strange talent this stupid dragon had triggered. When he was about to give up on being saved, he glanced at the 2 balls at the back of his head and let out a long sigh. Then, he looked down at the ground below. I just said that there's a lot of life here, and it's already so desolate. This place has been desolate for many years. It seems that no matter how big the buffer zone is, it's not enough to sustain permanent living conditions. After all, it's missing the heart of the world. From a moment it was dug out and thrown into the void, it was no longer under the control of the heart of the world. Moreover, it's still floating in the void, but it's already beyond my expectations that it could last until now. Yin couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the lifeless scene in front of him. There are many traces of battle. There are also bones buried here, Qin Yin said softly. It's probably because there was some kind of treasure here when it was green. It was snatched by the people who came in with us, Yuanshi said casually. Let's hurry up a little. Yin wrinkled his nose. With my talent for being a troublemaker, I'm afraid there's some kind of problem again. Everyone agreed. After all, they would never run out of trouble if they followed him. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.